one truth. And that truth is that UFOs are real. They've already done told you. Sometimes when you want somebody to know a truth, it's so you can set them up to believe a lie. And that's coming. I have zero doubt that lie is coming. What is the lie? Specifically, you want me to say it right now? For real? Real? On camera? To be put in the show? Yeah. Okay. Problem with that. If we tell the lie before it's told, they can adapt. That wouldn't be wise. I'll tell you privately, but I would really think about it if you want to put this in your show. For real. That's a real thing I'm telling you. So will you think about it before putting it in your show? Absolutely. Okay. So UFOs are real, and they've been here a long time, and that's the truth. But the lie is coming. All indications, like all of them, is that that lie is going to be that there is a craft slowly making its way to us here on Earth. And that is the lie they're going to want you to believe. Nuanced. How they explain that, the nature of that threat. But that 100% is the lie you are going to be told. You even got a date. People have been whispering a date for a long time now. I know where that lie comes from. I know specifically what document from the 70s initiated the idea of that lie. A classified document. That is the lie you will be told. You're going to be told that there is a craft on its way to Earth. That's the lie. Maybe I'm wrong.
The UFO-UAP phenomena is augmenting at an immeasurable rate. The powers that be had far superior control of disseminating information in the early 80s and 90s as the internet, and smartphones haven't been invented yet. Now that information technology is available everywhere, and to virtually everyone the strategy of the government had to adapt and overcome. Jeremy Corbell is among other things a filmmaker, and I feel you, like myself, find it extremely interesting to hear him explain how the government told the public the truth about UFOs existing to set us up for a lie. Anyone using logic realizes that if you're on a documentary covering the subject and you state that a lie is coming, the next logical question you'll be asked is, what's the lie we're all going to be told? He then explains to the producer that if we tell the lie before it's presented to us, then they can adapt. A logical question I felt we all would ask is, why would you bring up the lie at all if you never intended to disclose it? He then finishes the scene with dramatic certainty, explaining the lie to the producer in spite of his previous warning, which once again questions rational logic, stating that the lie will be told is, a craft is slowly approaching Earth. The final words from him are, maybe I'm wrong. The presentation you're about to watch is called The Other Space Program, filmed on August 21st, 1997. Often hailed as the original rocket man, David Adair is an American rocket scientist, inventor, and expert in space technology. He is renowned for his groundbreaking work in advanced propulsion systems and space technology spin-off applications for industry and commercial use. At just 11 years old, Adair built his first rocket, a project that ignited a lifelong passion for science and innovation. By the age of 17, his talent earned him the Most Outstanding in the Field of Engineering Services Award from the U.S. Air Force. His remarkable achievements drew the attention of prominent figures, including Air Force General Curtis LeMay, who facilitated Adair's work on an electromagnetic fusion containment rocket. Adair is also known for his first-hand testimony on extraterrestrial technology and experiences at Area 51, contributing to his reputation as an authoritative voice on UFOs.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the forum. Little green men and rocket scientists. Wow, do the two go hand in hand? I bet there's a lot more there than you realize. And I bet you're going to find out a lot of things tonight that you never even suspected or guessed. This evening that we're pleased to welcome our guest speaker, Mr. David Adair, to the Granada Forum. He's conducted his own Need to Know conference. He is a top rocket scientist. He's an international space consultant. He's an internationally recognized leader and expert in space technology. And he will be speaking to us about how he and other select individuals testified under oath before a U.S. Joint Senate and House hearing in Washington, D.C. on April 9th of this year. The subject dealt with their firsthand experience with UFOs and extraterrestrial phenomenon intelligence in top secret Air Force base known as Area 51. We'll also learn about other space programs. Additionally, Mr. Adair will talk about his new book, America's Fall from Space. This recounts the story of the U.S. space program from Wernher von Braun's beginnings building the V-2s for Nazi Germany to the horrible Challenger incident. As a rocket scientist child prodigy, he was taken by the government to work on the Navy's newest jet engines, later becoming a space technology consultant who crossed swords with NASA when he learned of the corruption and the technical problems that the Challenger shuttle faced prior to its launching. Also included will be a brief recounting of his recent experience at the Roswell 50th anniversary celebration, where he was an invited guest speaker. This is sure to be a most enlightening presentation, and questions can be asked regarding little green men afterwards. Now, please join me with a great big Granada Forum welcome to Mr. David Adair.
Well, as we've may have seen that, well, let me ask some questions first. I need to know a few things here. How many people heard me on Art Bell last night? Golly, about half the room. Wasn't right. It was night for last. At 3 a.m., I lost track. I don't know. Y'all's radio programs run a little different than we do back home. We roll up sidewalks about 10 o'clock at night, and that's it. As you can tell, y'all, I'm from Georgia, so we got to get some proper English first. Y'all is singular, all y'all is plural. Okay. All right. And you thought this was going to be a dry lecture from a rocket scientist, didn't you? Yeah. Wrong answer. How many people here saw, well, maybe I should back up for a minute. Do you remember the last time I was supposed to be here? Well, some of you are going, no. Well, anyway, for those who didn't know, I was supposed to be here, what was it, last month? Sometimes, boy, see how good I am? Well, what happened was, this is the little guy that caused the problem. This is my planner. I gotta get a bigger planner. I had wrote your date in here for Friday, the next night. So I had Friday off, and I went down Sunset Boulevard. But anyway, I wrote my wrong date in the wrong place. I do that about once every 10 years, and I was 12 years overdue, so y'all got it. So normally that's not a problem. I work things out with clients and stuff, but what I wasn't ready for was the reaction, because I guess y'all really take a lot of things seriously here. Let me give you an example. When I didn't show up, it's proverbial things when the stuff hit the fan, because boy, it set off a chain reaction. First thing that happens, my wife calls and goes, "What have you done?" I go, "What?" She goes, "You didn't show up at that meeting." I went, "Oh God," that was the first notice. And then she said, "All these people are calling, and there are 3 cars out in the driveway, and people are armed. They're going to go look for you. They think you've been abducted." Jeff Baker of Baker Brigade, on that radio, he called me. I've left several messages. David, I don't know if you're all right or not, but there is about 5,000 phone calls on this radio station. And he said, man, there's a militia forming out there. It's going to go look for you. And all this is happening, and I'm just standing in my friend's living room going, oh my God, I'm listening to all this stuff. And so, yeah, people got really perturbed. They thought, oh, he's been taken. That's it. He's gone. They done come and got him. So, no, I just forgot to write my thing in the right day on my planner. So anyhow, I appreciate the attention. Uh, I could imagine some of my clients in corporate America, if I don't show up, fire him. He may be dead, good, but it saved us some trouble. But yeah, y'all kind of went a little upset there. So anyhow, those of you that were here, you saw a film. So that got to my head, one of my films. How many people in here saw that film? Okay, boy, quite a few of you. We have an option on programs. I was going to go through that film, and we got a problem. About a third of you have seen that, but I don't want to repeat the information again. So what we'll do, we'll kind of jump around on some of the programs, and I'll give you more details on those projects than you got on the tape. So it might take care of both sides that hadn't seen it and those who've had. Let me give you a background on what I do. I work as a TTC. That's a technology transfer consultant, and you might wonder, what is technology transfer? Well, it's, in my particular case, it's where I take an existing space technology, something that we had built out in orbit to be used out there for a need or a service or something that we had to get done. I come along and I look at that and I go, wow, I wonder how I can redesign that and apply it into commercial applications. So the company I have is called Intersect. I'm based in Atlanta, Georgia. Now you know where I got that y'all's accent. But anyway, in my company, what I do is I do a transfer. So the best way to describe that, maybe I should give you an example. See, right here you have John Young. This is what I wanted. This thing right here that we have stuck on John's neck is a sensor, and it'll pick up blood pressure, pulse rate, respiratory functions. We tape them all over the body. The information is then sent from orbit back down to ground by telemetry, and the doctors sitting there can look at the astronaut's blood pressure, pulse rate, respiratory functions, and all the vital signs. I was looking at that and I was going, wow, you know what we could do with that? So we micro-miniaturize the process down. And let's say you just had a head-on collision out here or a car wreck, which I think that might be a very common event around here from what I've seen in traffic today. But it's been a really tremendous impact. So the people are injured, they're dying from the crash. The paramedics come sliding up to the rescue. They throw open this little suitcase. They hook the leads onto the person laying in the street. The information is sent from the paramedic units to a local hospital by radio waves. The doctors look at the scope and they're looking at the blood pressure, the pulse rate, the respiratory functions, all the vital signs. The doctor will tell the paramedics what to do to stabilize that person to get them to a trauma center, and that's where those suitcases came from. That's technology transfer. So it's where we take stuff and redesign it. I can give you some more maybe practical applications, maybe not so drastic. Let me tell you a story. On the Apollo spacecrafts, those things are not very big. They're about the size of a good broom closet. You got 3 men in there, okay? So they are eating solid food, okay? It's 3 days out, 3 days back, 2 days on the moon. It's about 8 days. So after about 3 days of eating solid food, what's going to happen, y'all? Something's got to give, you know? Okay, well, you got another problem. It's weightless. Things float. You begin to appreciate this problem, right? It will get your attention, I guarantee you. So anyhow, there are no bathrooms on board. They wear diapers. So we had to build a very special diaper that could absorb nasty stuff away, keep them dry while they're still there, and hold things together, okay? Technology transfer called Johnson & Johnson, you get a disposable diaper, and that's where it came from. That's technology transfer. Now, it goes on, and we can go for hours and hours. There are about 72,000 transfer already occurred out of the space program into the commercial sector. And it's just influenced and intertwined in your life. And you just couldn't believe how much stuff you use every day that you didn't even think about that came from the space program. So that's what technology transfer is. Now you might find that that's pretty useful, because in the space program, on the commercial side where I'm at, I don't work for NASA. If I worked for NASA, it would be like, which it is right now, we get along about as well as Arabs and Israelis do. All right. We are hostile competitors. They're in the bureaucratic cesspool. I'm over here in the commercial sector. So you can tell I don't get a lot of Christmas cards from them boys. But we're into making money and profits out there. And in return, we make products. Now, you know about a space shuttle. They take off like a rocket, and they can perform like a spacecraft. Then they come back in and land on a runway like a plane, and they can do this over and over again. So you have a cycle. Has anybody ever bothered to tell you what's the benefits of all this? You know, what could you possibly get out of that? Well, other than some Pampers and maybe little paramedic units, you may not really think very much about what you could get from the space program. But it's really a lot more effective in your life than you're even aware of. I'll show you that. We have something right here. This is a satellite that's being launched into space. Now, years ago, a president named Ronald Reagan, which we called him in our world Ronnie Reagan. Anyway, he came in there and he asked if there could be a communication system built that could withstand a full thermonuclear strike by the Soviet Union. That's about 4,000 warheads exploding at one time in continental America. It would be a very fun, interesting day. So anyhow, to build a communication system on the ground, it would be really impossible, because the ground will be just absolutely blasted away by EMPs, electronic magnetic pulse. It would fry all your communications. So the only place we could go is space. So we built this communication system with these satellites. Rockwell International put them out, and we've got 6 satellites in 3 different orbits, and we ended up with about 18 satellites, and we put some additional satellites out there, and we've got them all in place. They formed this grid around the planet. Well, once we got that thing in place, and it was extremely expensive, what happened to the Berlin Wall? It collapsed. What happened to the Soviet Union? They collapsed. So the thing that we had built this $500 billion program for doesn't exist now. So you can't justify it. So what do? What any good little red-blooded bureaucrat will do, they dump it. So they dumped the system into the corporate side. And when we looked at the whole systems and we saw it coming, one of the smaller things we get off this grid right now is called World Wide Web and Internet. Yeah, that's what it was built for. We didn't build it for you to play on internet with. I mean, come on, y'all. Think about a massive system. We couldn't afford it in the commercial sector. Military built it for a communication system to survive first strike nuclear attack. Now, what you're playing with out there is a pretty nifty system. But you think you're really big and bad on your little computer with the internet and web and talk to everybody in the world. That's kind of cool. But let me tell you something. You're only pushing less than 5% of that grid's capacity. What's in the other 95%? Good question. There is, in the commercial side, there is products and services coming that you're just not going to believe. One thing that we can do with this system is the telecommunications. The way the system worked for the military, a ground user, such as a combat soldier or a military aircraft, can look onto any 4 satellites within the satellite grid. Those satellites will then initiate a search system where we will start locking onto the systems. And with that, we can tell whether you're a ground base or sea base or an air base object. We can tell how fast you're moving within a fraction of 1 mile per hour. We can estimate your ETA, estimated time of arrival within a millionth of a second, and all this acquisition data is occurring in 1 nanosecond, 1 billionth of a second. We're pretty fast out there with that. So anyway, once this system right here goes into effect, the first thing that happened, well, let me give you a little dates here. We got the grid in at the very last satellite parked in the system came online August 1st, 1991. What happened the next day? Gulf War, Kuwait is invaded. And we're all sitting there looking at this going, this is too good. God. Somebody write Hussein a thank you card. Oh, bless his little heart. He invaded that country. See, we want to test this grid. This grid is so powerful, there's no way to test it really unless you got a full-scale, real live, honest-to-God war. Okay, well, you just don't go out and invent one of those. At least some of you might disagree with that. But I've been hanging around metaphysical people too long. They're messing with my head, I'm telling you. I can't even look at the newspaper any normal anymore. My colleagues are looking at me and they go, let's say something. I go, well, how do you know that doesn't transcend across a dimensional barrier to jump where you can maybe receive some kind of message from some kind of disembodied spirit out there, you know, and maybe give you some ideas. And they're looking at me going, David, what have you been smoking, you know? So I said, never mind. So anyhow, I'm kind of locked in the 3D world, but UFO Congress I just came from, the Congress or the meeting before that, the Global Science Congress. So I've been pretty saturated already, and I'm starting to leak all these strange ideas. But anyhow, back to science. One of the first things we did with Squid when Hussein did that nifty little invasion was this system could now demonstrate its capabilities. A lot of this technology hadn't been used yet. Let me explain something to you, or ask you a question. I'm sure did anybody watch the Gulf War on TV? Stupid question. Who did not watch it? Bless your hearts. I'm with you guys. But anyway, y'all watched the Gulf War, and it was like one of the neatest, you know, technological soap operas going on. All this technology we hadn't even tried yet. We've had different pieces of it come together, but not everything at one time. Believe me, we dumped everything we had at that guy. So as you thought about it, here you have an aircraft carrier sitting out in the Gulf, Persian Gulf. It fires a Tomahawk missile, a cruise missile. This thing goes sailing out of the ship, spreads its wings, and takes off. It's going to fly about 300 feet, sometimes as low as 100 feet off the ground, which that's about the height of a 10-story window. It's going to fly about 450 miles, like what, from here to San Francisco? It's about the same distance. Well, when you get there with it, you're going to go through Main Street in Baghdad, hook a right at the square, go down to the 2nd Street, turn left, and strike the second building on the left and go in that third window on the right. Got that? No problem. And we did. The military of Hussein is not quite as honorable as the way we do it. They build their central intelligence building in between a hospital and a school, sitting right in the middle. Can't bomb it, you know. A cruise missile can come flying in the window, and the last thing you see is somebody standing out the window going, that's it, it's all over with, and take out that entire building without hurting the school, the hospital on each side of it. So if you think about that for a minute, how do they do that? GPS, Global Positioning System, was allowed the coordinations for us to be able to maneuver through all that system. So the first thing that they did is they dropped a sergeant behind the enemy lines. And when he got there, he set up his GPS coordinator. Now he's looking out over the battlefield. Here comes 2 Iraqi tank divisions. That is about 60-some tanks and about 30,000 men. He sits there and he starts punching in his coordinates, and he is driving artillery in at a 1 square inch pattern accuracy. 1 shell severs the turret right off a tank per shot. At the end of the day, this man by himself, it's tough and more, he killed 30,000 people and 60 tanks all by himself. Now, people go, that's awful. Well, war's not a fun place to be. It is awful. But would you like the alternative? Would you rather have your 18-year-old son out there facing those tanks? No. We have one little sergeant sitting out there, and he'd tuck everybody out. Sergeant York, eat your heart out. So, the only thing the sergeant complained about, his fingers were tired. So, that's the power of technology, and it's even more powerful. This is all going through the same system you play with the internet with. Keep that in mind. Other things that it can do, I just told you, precision weapon delivery, terminal navigation, landing, approach capability. You can be in a solid night landing, tremendous storms, have your navigation shot up, and GPS will take you within a 12-inch accuracy pattern landing. Will know where you are physically within 12 inches, anywhere on the surface of the earth in a millionth of a second. Pretty nifty. They help with land operations in the military. They also navigation performance and jamming the environment. I wish you could maybe see what the Iraqis saw on their radar when we fired the system up. Imagine, it was everything they had electronically just started snowing out and then scrambling and making all kinds of noises. Kind of looked like something like a frog in a blender. Okay, pretty rough. So anyway, that's extremely helpful in jamming navigation. The other thing that we did, have you ever thought about it? In the entire war was an air war. Basically, we had a lot of people on the ground, but the real assaults were occurring. We flew almost 1,500 attack missions. We had a lot of pilots shot down, but only a few captured. So what's going on? When the plane would go down and crash, and even if the pilot's unconscious, the GPS systems go off, and we know where that pilot is laying on the ground within 12 inches. We send in a Delta force that obliterates everything in the area. We pull the pilot out and go home. The Iraqis think, well, why are the Americans doing a major offensive in this area? We're not. We're extracting a pilot. The reason some pilots were caught, they landed right in the middle of a huge Iraqi battalion, so you just couldn't go in there and pull him out. So that's why we only had just a few pilots caught. So that was a really handy system. Unlike Vietnam, we didn't have GPS then. We wouldn't have lost but a few of our pilots. So that's military applications of the GPS system. Now enters my little crowd, and we start doing subsystems, and we redesign the modifications for commercial applications. First thing we're going to do is we hook it to aircraft. Now imagine, I fly a lot, and I look out the window and I see these planes going by, and I thought, last thing I want to see is like the nose of an aircraft coming at me. So collisions can be avoided because how close can we tell where things are? 12 inches. So next time you're in a rainstorm at night coming in for a landing, and you know there's other aircraft all around you, the pilots know where everybody's at just as if it's clear day, so they can come in for a landing. Other things we can do, vehicle monitoring, so we can tell me cars are locked into place, and then tell the city governments, y'all got to do something about that bottleneck over there. In this town's particular case, I don't know what you're going to do about it. You got more bottlenecks than the dog's got fleas. So law enforcement can use this system. Might not like this one. A guy way out in the desert, right? Locks on GPS. You go whizzing by. He knows how fast you're going in a fraction of 1 mile per hour. Hey, David, wait a minute. This is not so good. So anyway, we can take tankers out of the harbor when they're fogged in. That's a real advantage. And there are other systems that we're going to do. Now this system I am in the process of building right now, is extremely political. There's a problem with the politics of this type of technology I'm about to do, and I'm sure y'all have something to say about it. Right now, in the state of Florida, there are 3,000 convicted felons. Some of these guys wielded axes and killed a bunch of people. The Attorney General has to release these people. Have to. He's being ordered by the United States Supreme Court to release them. You know why? They violated their civil rights because prisons are too crowded in Florida, so they've got to release them. And I'm sitting there going, what's wrong with this picture? We're going to turn loose, you know, you know, Al the Axe Man over here out on the street. I mean, this is insane. So I worked a deal where I'll be working with the Attorney General of Florida, and what I can do, there's this little ankle bracelet we're going to snap on their ankles, which is made of a cold rolled titanium. Unless he's got a diamond laser, he's going to have to cut his foot off to get this thing off. It will send out a beaker monitoring him 24 hours a day, and we'll know where he's at within a 12-inch radius. If he commits a crime, it will also locate time, date, and place, which you can use in a court of law for prosecution. So they may be walking on the street, but they're still totally under arrest. All right, that sounds pretty good. Now, you can't inject anything into them because that violates their constitutional rights. Do you know that a felony prisoner has one-third more rights than you do? Check it out. So the next technology I'm doing that just to get a system in place, and I'll use these prisoners for a good example. But the next thing I want to do, you might have a problem with it at first, but listen, hear me out. You can bring your child to me, and I will fire a little air gun, and I can inject a chip into this child's body. Now, you take your child home, and you might think, well, wait a minute, that sounds like Big Brother. Only the parents are going to have the codes, and I can create a self-repetition, self-destroying system, so if it ever tries to be activated without the proper activation that only the parents have, it disintegrates. If you lose your code, you will have to come in. I'll give you a new code and reprogram Junior there without bothering anything in the body. And you go back out because I don't have the code. No human on the planet will have the code but you. And we can't even extract it out. So that eliminates Big Brother out of the picture. Now, that child's out there playing in their yard, and she just suddenly, you go in to get something to drink, come back out, and your child's gone. Your little girl's gone. You call in the code activates it, and we'll track that child anywhere within 12 inches on the surface of the planet. We can do it in 1/1,000,000th of a second. We'll notify the police, let them...
Of us that were involved in the thing, including the video, every one of us is going to do 20 plus years in the military in very responsible positions. So I'd say the world needs to know that. It's not a joke.
Stated earlier, do we have the bodies of the pilots who piloted this craft?
As I've stated publicly already in my News Nation interview, biologics came with some of these recoveries, yeah.
Were they, I guess, human or non-human biologics?
Non-human, and that was the assessment of people with direct knowledge on the program I talked to that are currently still on the program.
And was this documentary evidence, this video, photos, eyewitness? Like, how would that be determined?
The specific documentation I would have to talk to you in a skiff about.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. So, and you may or may not be able to answer my last question, and maybe we get into a skiff at the next hearing that we have, but who in the government, either what agency, sub-agency, what contractors, who should be called into the next hearing about UAPs, either in a public setting or even in a private setting? And you probably can't name names, but what agencies or organizations, contractors, et cetera, do we need to call in to get these questions answered, whether it's about funding, what programs are happening, and what's out there?
I can give you a specific cooperative and hostile witness list of specific individuals that were in those.
And how soon can we get that list?
I'm happy to provide that to you after the hearing.
Super.
We've all seen this performance before when presenting Congress with the alien UAP disclosure. Mr. Grush is asked if bodies came with this craft, and he answers yes. Some biologics were recovered, and he's then asked if they were human or non-human biologics. His answer was a resounding non-human. He then was asked what specific documentary evidence was used to record this, videos, photos, or eyewitness, and Mr. Grush explains regarding the specific documentation he would have to speak to Congress in a skiff about. Speaking words while explaining nothing to your audience and presenting no actual evidence is a true art, and one that really must be respected. One logical answer for the lack of transparency may be for us all. To have to accept incidents like these presented from various prestigious sources, discussing humans being abducted for alien biological testing, which yields a victim no less than a minimum of lifelong post-traumatic stress disorder, to a maximum of PTSD, also including some terrifying physical side
by
effects
alien
from their tests.
or non-human technology and or beings that has caused harm to humans.
What's your reaction to what Jake describes there?
Well, it seems to be that he was in contact with some type of energy, we might say, with that left a medical footprint on his body. And that's not something that you can manifest in your head. So obviously something actually did happen to him. You get the impression that something did. And there was a lot of other things that happened to him during that period that he narrated, that in his narratives, that led me to believe that, what he was very earnest about this. So I believe this actually did happen to him. There was nothing construed. And to have those things happen is very similar to other types.
What would cause, for example, skin to literally heal off somebody's body? What kind of exposure, for example?
So sometimes radiation, if you ever have any problem with your skin, radiation may do multiple electrons. So they actually shoot electrons into your skin. You get very, very localized radiation deposits into your skin, which would cause it to have local lesions on your skin. And sometimes you get enough of it, and it will start separating from the dermis. It'll start actually separating and coming and peeling off. And I've had many patients describe this, show this, and talk to medical doctors. And actually, this was something that was pretty prevalent when people actually came into contact with dangerous type of objects.
The other thing that Jake described were lesions on his body. Have you had that experience yourself with witnesses and other experiences who've been exposed to anomalous?
Yeah, so what happens is that as your body absorbs this energy, it actually does something to it. So your DNA absorbs it. It actually will affect your DNA. It'll break it apart and turn it into almost like a cancer type of thing, where it'll actually have a reaction. So you'll get the dimples, you get the bubbles. It'll almost look like a herpes, but then when they look at it and they actually biopsy it, it's not a herpes. So you'll get these lesions on your skin. Luckily, most of these things dissipate after maybe a week or so. But sure enough, there's a lot of people that have reported that they get these lesions. And, they're, of course, very frightened. Nobody wants to have these things.
Sure. There's a few photographs that you very kindly sent us before we went on air. Can you talk to those? What do they show?
So those are instances where people have, first of all, witnessed something anomalous. Like they looked up in the sky, there was something floating by, there was an orb, there was a UFO craft. They were never alone. Most of those people were not alone. Other people seen it, but these particular people came back like a day or two later, or actually 24 hours later, and started developing these bubbles on their skin. So these areas, these blotchy areas that have these pimply areas, almost like they very, very locally burned or actually had a radiation treatment very locally. And then, of course, that led to discolored urination, all the signals that you get, or all the symptoms you get when you have exposed or absorbed some type of radiation. One of the things that are very interesting, and he talks about, is heart murmur. One of the interesting things that happens when you have an interaction with these entities, and you have this energy that's coming from them, your body reacts in a very, very sinister way. You get into a fight flight type of thing where your immune system kicks up, your capillaries shrink, so your blood pressure goes up. Then you start getting into this whole autoimmune reaction. And when you get an autoimmune reaction and your body's trying to fight something, it doesn't know what it is, because it can't understand what this energy or this thing is coming into your body. But it could affect your autoimmune responses, affects your heart valves to the point where after a certain period of time, they could develop a murmur. So when I heard that, I said, yeah, that's definitely, because then I said, at this point, he definitely got something into his body that that body just did not understand, and it caused this reaction. So that's when I said that's pretty genuine what's happened to him.
Wow, so you've seen these heart murmurs before?
Yeah, we have several people that actually went away. In fact, there's a great study.
So what happened to you?
We're not quite sure. We were transporting HVTs.
High-value targets.
High-value target, which are, at this time, was a large sealed container. I'll tell you, I was near the continent of Africa. And after this particular mission, me and everyone on my team got extremely sick.
How sick?
Like physically ill in the hospital. Within, weeks after this, I'd lost every hair on my body, which they call an alopecia, migrating alopecia. And I also lost the skin on my arms.
So the skin's actually falling off your body?
Yeah, like not just falling off, like it was lopping off within a couple of days, like a severe sun. This led to a series of all kinds of other what I have learned since being with Dr. Nolan is autoimmune issues. I ended up developing a severe heart murmur that I'd never had before, which is the same thing that John Burroughs had. And throughout my career, I would have reoccurring autoimmune dysfunction when exposed to other things. I ended up recovering from that at the time, and because of the nature of my work was classified, the VA was only dealing with symptomology, not causation in the treatment of my injuries. And I didn't even really understand that it was radiation.
So were you treated for radiation poisoning?
No, I was not.
Are you being now?
No, I'm not being treated now for radiation poisoning.
But you're being investigated for what sounds like a radiation exposure.
Yeah, because I had other occurrences later in my career after 9/11 when I left my enlisted capacity and went to work as a contractor. I've had other episodes where I've had other illnesses, and I've lost the hair on my body and patched out several times. And I'm getting treatment through the Palo Alto VA under the supervision of Dr. Gary Nolan right now, and he's dedicating his expertise and his clout to get me the best treatment I can get.
Now, Professor Gary Nolan is one of the world's top immunologists, hugely respected scientist who has, as I understand it, he's spoken publicly that he's been involved in a program for an intelligence agency investigating Havana syndrome.
Yes.
So does it give you some comfort that you're now getting the medical help that you should have got all those years ago?
Hell yeah, it does. And plus, he's got the best bedside manner I've ever experienced.
Let them lock in on Homer, and they find the bad guys, and you get your little girl back. So, now, I'll tell you this. If you don't support and let people like us get into the commercial market of that I damn guarantee is going to happen. You will have a federal injunction that will come on that technology, and only the federal system will be able to use that. And if you don't have a commercial competitor out there that opposite the governmental side, you're wide open for Big Brother to go ahead and stamp you like a cow. Now I want to tell you something else. Well, it's such an irony. Do you know what law Hillary Clinton specializes in? Children. She is a child lawyer. She represents children's rights. She's a children's rights lawyer. Now, let me ask you a simple question. Check this out. Call this 1-800 number for National Center for Missing and Abused Children. 50,000 kids disappear every 12 months in this country. That's 5 children per hour. Aren't y'all worried about that? Aren't you concerned? Don't you want to know where they're going? Well, you're not going to find out if you're sitting in here doing nothing. So somebody builds a system where we can find out where they're going. Now, we know that about 35-40% are stolen by the other parent. Okay, fine. Now you got 25,000 missing without a trace. It's been going on for 10 years. That's 250,000 kids gone. And adults as well. I want to know where they're going. I'm going to find out. And I'll do it with state rights. I'll do it with the state of Florida. So I'm not going to wait for permission from the feds. Now, another thing about the missing children is that if you let that system go on, you'll find something else interesting. Not just America, but every country on the planet's got the same problem. And the numbers are just as big, even larger in third world countries. That's mind-boggling, y'all. It took us 14 years to kill 50,000 people in Vietnam. You lose that many in 24 months without a trace. That's insane. And how you think you don't pay much attention, or you pay a lot of attention? Well, let me tell you about a little survey that a friend of mine, he's 8 years old, and he did a science project. He made a picture of himself, put it on his poster, hung it on the mall, and it said, "This child is so-and-so and came up missing." And then if you read down to the bottom, it goes, "I'm standing over here on the right. Come over and talk to me." He stood there with his little clipboard watching people. And out of every 100 people that came through the doors, only 3 would read the message. 3% would take time to look. Something wrong here, y'all. So, I'm just out to try to straighten some of this out with a technological system. And it's kind of a neat karma to it. We build it for a military system, and we turn around and use it to save kids. Kind of neat, isn't it? 91. It started in 91, but the original design, 1975. No. It was still locked up in the military system. It still hasn't gotten into all the commercial aircraft systems. It's just now starting. They've got, I don't know if you've been reading some articles, Time Magazine's transportation system that's been a little bit neglected in the FAA. So all of a sudden this technology became real handy. Now, that's the NavStar system. It'll affect all kinds of industries and stuff in your life. Now, I mentioned to you that it will change a consumer part, this grid will. How so? Well, imagine this. In the very near future, and old Bill Gates, and I agree with Bill on something, there's less than 10% of the system up for you to use. But when we cross over to this like 30, 40% of this grid, you're going to have an interesting little bit of technology to fool with. You turn on your TV set, and in the rooms of your house, you have these funny looking little tripod looking things that will be in each corner. And you can have your house, when it's originally built, with a special reflective material. And what happens, you turn on television. Let's say you're watching Jurassic Park or another sequel. And all of a sudden, your entire house turns into a holographic jungle. So real, you believe you're standing there. Holodeck of Star Trek is what's happening in your house. You put these devices all over your house. Why would you want to do that? Well, let's say a velociraptor comes running through the room. It's chasing the main star in the movie. They run back to the back of the house. You get out of your chair and you run with them. Interactive television. That's going to be pretty neat. But I can see problems. Somebody's getting a drink in the kitchen, walk out, and a velociraptor's come running at them. They drop dead of a heart attack. You know? So may have sometimes realism is too real. These are a type of products that will be coming. It'll be holographic, three-dimensional, virtual reality right in your living room throughout your house. That's just one little toy you can play with. Now, let's talk about space industrialization. And the reason we want to go out there is zero gravity and total vacuum. I'm going to just jump around this program a little bit because we got a tremendous amount of stuff to cover. And I know there's going to be a lot of questions about a lot of things. So the reason we want to go out in space and do this type of research is because of what we're going to learn and the things we've already learned. I'm going to, I'll back up to one here. That's a beam extender. We got to build a lot of big devices out there. So the beam extender is a thing that comes out of the cargo bay of the space shuttle, rolls out this sheet metal that looks like rolls of toilet paper. That's not what they are. And they pull the sheet metal off and flash weld it in place and move from a raw product to a finished product that looks like a telecommunication tower. Now this machine can do it at 5 feet a minute. That didn't impress you, huh? Okay. All right, let me give you an example then. Here's the Seattle Space Needle Tower in Seattle, Washington. That thing is 500 feet tall, weighs 8,660 tons, and it took 50 men working 6 months around the clock to build this tower. With that beam extender, we can build a tower 160 feet taller than this tower, but I don't need 50 men in 6 months. I can do it with 2 astronauts in 3 hours. Ooh, heavy metal. Okay, that got you. Why do you want to build something so big and so fast? Well, we have customers. And this customer right here needs this grid built. And let's see if you can guess the name of the customer. Its competitors are MCI, Sprint, and Skyline. Yeah, gee, well, actually it's Ma Bell, AT&T. Let's say we have Columbia and Discovery working on this grid. And when they're through, there's a space shuttle at the bottom. This grid will be 1/2 a mile across when we complete it, and we'll push it 22,300 miles out to a geostationary position orbit. What does geostationary mean? Well, first of all, we use big words in science that means very simple things, and we do that for job security. The satellite will actually turn same speed the Earth turns, so it can focus 24 hours a day on one spot. In this case, it'll be the continent of North America. Once this grid turns to cell phone, then you're going to buy yourself an interesting looking dial face wristwatch, and you guessed it, that's your telephone now. Well, not a big jump. We went from your belt to your wrist, but there's more. That's also a 200 Pentium computer. It's also a GPS global tracking system. So we can find you if you're injured out there being a big bad hunter and you shoot yourself, I'm hurt out here. Find where you're laying within a few feet. Pretty handy. I will tell you from personal experiences, this thing can lock on you in your position and tell a precise time. And I can tell you that personally, that can sometimes be really not good, but that's your problem. We're just building a system. You can figure that one out yourself. Now, this is not what it looks like. You step on the foot and the lid opens. That's not a space trash can. Okay, that's a Hubble telescope. And just recently, it was the next thing to a space trash can. So, yeah, NASA loves me, don't they? So, well, why is the Hubble telescope so important to you? It's because of its technological capability. It can really tell us things that can rattle you a little bit. Well, how so? Well, this thing's optical powers are so powerful since it only has a 100-inch mirror lens, which is half the size of the largest ground-based telescopes in the world. But because it's outside this blue Earth atmosphere, it's like sliding a steamy shower door out of your eyes. And this thing now has approximately a 7-dimensional gain and 50 times the power of the largest ground-based telescopes on Earth. Well, why is that so important to you? Well, imagine this. One day you turn on the telescope and you got this thing that looks like National Enquirer on the Wall Street Journal and it says contact with another world, because you could do a visual contact if they tell you, but that would pop your cornflakes surely when you're eating that, looking at the Wall Street Journal. Now, what's interesting about the telescope is some interesting little oddities. Guess where the command center of this telescope is? People think, well, NASA, they would think Washington, D.C., Houston, JPL. No, the control center of this telescope is in the center of Johns Hopkins Medical Center. Why is that? Because a private contractor runs this telescope. Don't get into the word game NASA wants. They say they're privatizing the space program. It's not what you want. You want commercializing the space program. Privatize means they get a private contractor in there, and you know what he's got as a clause? He does not have to show you what he sees for 6 months. You paid $1.5 billion for that thing, and it's 6 months before they even show you what it sees. I don't know about y'all, but I'm a little perturbed about that. So I'm ranting and raving to Congress about it to get that policy changed. So why is this so important? Well, first of all, let me tell you what it has shown us. Do you know there are now 150 billion known galaxies, thanks to the Hubble. There are 100 billion stars in each one of those galaxies. It's 100 billion times 150 billion. Each of those stars have solar systems, which have maybe 10 to 15 planets. And each of those planets, some of them may have 15 to 20 moons. Add all this up, and what number do you come up with? The same number that is the number of all the grains of the sands of the deserts and the oceans on the planet Earth. Now, let's do a little statistics. If you take 1/10 of 1/100th of 1/1,000,000th of 1% and say they're like this, guess how many planets you've got that looks like Earth? 100 million populated planets. Statistically, what do you think the odds are that somebody's out there? Jimmy the Greek wouldn't touch you with a 100-foot pole. So, the Hubble telescope could one day turn its lenses on, and if they decide to tell us and be truthful, we might be staring at something like that. Another civilization on another planet. So, I will kind of go back and forth on all this. You might wonder what life was like for me as a child. since I learned to do all this stuff. A lot of you heard me on Art Bell, right? Oh God, I see people grinning and laughing. Yeah, we know about that. So anyway, I've never met or talked to Art Bell in my life until night for last. I didn't know what to expect. I know that he had a big broadcasting band, but my God, we got phone calls from Australia. And I'm going, oi. So Art has a pretty good following, about 30 million. So I thought I'd be on there about 5 minutes. I was there from 10 in the evening until 3 in the morning. And in between commercials, I went, can I go home? Finally, I fell asleep and Art, David. Yeah. So if I sounded a little tired at the end, and you're lucky you even heard me. But Art, he's a character, man. He had to ask all kinds of questions. So what was life like for me when I was growing up? Well, let me kind of give you an idea. The first rocket I built, I was 12 years old, the one that I launched, the very first one. The engine is a liquid-fueled type rocket. It has little cryogenic pumps in it where we're pumping a fluid 400 below zero. Okay, can you imagine handling that stuff? So you might heard on our belt, well, how did you have such access to things? Well, my dad worked for a guy named Lee Petty, and he has a son named Richard. I don't know if you ever heard of these guys. No? Well, yes, Winston Cup about 100 times. They're the most famous race car drivers on earth, and they drive these stock cars. And my dad worked for them about 20 years. So they had state-of-the-art high-performance machine shops, bigger than this. And if you knock all the walls out in this building, it's twice the size of this building. So huge machine shops, and these machine shops are built for one thing. What? Speed. So I'm looking at all this, and I'm 12 years old. My dad's having me overhauling 426 Chrysler Hemis. I could overhaul one of them things in 3.5 hours. Talk to a garage next time. Well, this guy can do them in 3 hours. It'll be 3 weeks, buddy, before we can get your car back. So we could do everything fast, but I could really do these engines. With 2 4-barrels on these engines, they turn 675 horsepower. Pretty big engines. And I'm 12 years old, and I'm learning to do that. And the Honer weighs more than I do to get them in blocks. That's how can you end up something like that. So anyhow, during the day, I was working these things, and everybody goes home, and what do I have laying there as far as the eye can see? All of these presses and lathes and machines, which I now know how to run. Also, the fuels in this building. They have things called fuelie, drag racers. We have methane, nitro, liquid oxygen, liquid hydrogen. We have kerosene. We got gasoline. I mean, man, basement farmer dream. I can do anything in here. So the Petties let me work in there, and they said, whatever you do, Dave, don't blow up the place, okay? So I built my first rocket, and I took it home, and it was about this tall. And I set it up in the backyard. My little friends come over. We're all 12-year-old kids stand there. Now, most of us aren't even allowed to play with matches. Okay, I don't need a match, believe me. So all my friends have never seen me launch anything. They hear me talk about it and stuff. I said, well, build this thing. So they're standing there, and they're looking for a 4th of July rocket. That's it. I backed everybody up, and we backed up about the length of a football field. And they're going, you're kidding. I said, they stand this far when they light a little bottle rocket and watch it go. I said, I don't think you guys want to be standing that close when this thing goes. So they kind of know I'm strange anyhow. So they get behind trees and stuff like that. And I like this thing. And I do it remote control, wireless, just poof. When I hit a detonation, it goes off. It leaves the backyard, y'all, 3,500 miles an hour. Burns a hole the size of this room in the yard. Down to the roof. Thank you. I turned around and looked at my friends, right? Nothing but dust and little particles in the air like a cartoon. It's ping. My mother comes running out of the house. This thing you can hear 4 miles away. It is she runs out there and she looks at the yard just incinerated, smoking. So she sees this white thing going straight to the sky, and she just goes. And I'm standing there looking at her, and I go. So my mom looks back at me and she goes, "Where's your friends?" And I went, "Somewhere in the next county by now." I didn't see them for a week. They said they told me I was going to be beaten to next week. But anyhow, that thing's still huffing and puffing. The altimeter I had hooked onto it, 120,000 feet. That's ionosphere, folks. That's the last band of layer of atmosphere on the planet. It's about to go to space out of my backyard. So I had it timed where it could come back in, delayed charge. I was counting the seconds like that, and then the wind shift and drift, and finally it comes back into sight. Parachutes come out, and the thing just starting to drift down, and I walk about from here to the back door and just catch it, and I had to let go real quick. It was so hot. But so while I'm standing there, we're watching it float back down to me, and I asked my mom, I said, God, I am so weird. I'm not like everybody else. What is this? And she looks at me and she goes, "Well, I'll tell you something. You didn't come from me. You came through me." It wasn't until 30-some years later with the metaphysic crowd that I figured out what my mom was trying to tell me. So, and then I was really worried. So, that was the first time we built a rocket. So you ask, well, how do you know how high up it went? It's real simple. You take a protractor. You ever seen them things, little half moon thing? You glue it to a board. You take a stick this long, screw it into the board, put two little eyelets on it, look through it like a rifle, and follow the rocket. You measure 500 feet from the pad. The cosine and trigonometry and table is cosine 1. Multiply that by 1 times 500, and then you get the reading off the protractor. Figure that into the calculation. Do your second clocks, and guess what? Altitude and speed you have in your hand. Now, the reason I make that point, it cost me $5.30 to make all this. NASA had the same thing at $12 million. And we both get the same accuracy. So, talk about overkill. On what? That's it. Well, you got to pay all these guys when you have 5 people sharpening pencils, at $40 an hour. So anyhow, that was the beginning of everything, and the rocket took off. Well, my mom and dad figured, it's time. My dad was practical, although he was. I was born in West Virginia. I was born in number 10 Pocahontas coal fields. I'm about 15th generation coal miner son. Glad to be a coal miner son. Anyway, so anyhow, my dad was a functional literate. He only went to 5th grade, but boy, he could build engines. So he also a very clear thinking person. First thing he did after he came home, he saw the yard, and then he walked over to me and said, "I guess you don't want to mow grass too much, do you?" And he asked me, he's very quick to the point, "Where did you assemble and prep this thing?" And I went, "In the basement." He goes, so first thing Dad did, we got up early next morning and everything was moved out of the basement to about 500 yards away to this big old service station we used to have. And he set a huge machine shop up in there for me so I could use. So he told my mother, he said, "Well, Vanjie, if he blows up this time, he won't launch the house with us in it. The building will disintegrate. We'll just put a big stone over there. This is David, our son, who used to be here." So my dad was pretty cool. But now I had a big machine shop, and it had a full bathroom in it and a little bed area. And I lived there. Did not live with my parents. I lived in this place. And I'm 12 years old. I'm odd, y'all. So I started building these rockets, and the rockets got bigger, bigger, and faster. And I was all the time calling FAA for flight tables. You know why I'm doing that? I don't want to go punching a hole in the belly of an Easterner, airliner going over. So at the time where everybody's at in the sky and go, boom, shooting things up to it. And FAA people going, "What is this weird blip on the screen?" Nothing moves 4,500 miles an hour now, you know. Some kind, and at that time, in the late 60s, UFO flap, like some kind of UFO, look at that, boom. But, and it was irregular. Hell yeah, the irregular, I was shooting in between the airliners. So, anyhow, things were happy until something happened. I wasn't satisfied with these engines anymore. Got to build something bigger now. So, right about when I'm about 13, I come up with this idea of building a new type of engine. It's called a fusion magnetic containment engine. Now, most people really go, "Oh, that's nice." Well, let me give you some appreciation, okay? Imagine if I said, let's take a hydrogen warhead, like 100 megaton, that if it went off right here in this room with us, you won't have to worry about it. But people about 2 miles away, it'll blow a hole 2 miles in diameter and 1,000 feet deep. It'll raise the temperature to about 100 million degrees centigrade. Now we're going to take all that force and power, and we're now going to put it inside, appropriately, we're going to put it inside a bottle and contain it. Right, sure. So that's exactly what this engine does. Now, how can it, this sounds stupid. It can't possibly be true. And that's 3D rocket scientist people tell me that. I'm like, oh yeah? Well, check this out. There's only one thing that we know of that can bend light and space and time out in space, and only one thing we know of that can swallow a sun that disappears, and that's called a black hole. And thanks to a little guy named Stephen Hawkins, we were able to come up with quantum mechanics, in which he now proved that these theories are now fact. Well, but you got to know something. You know what year this is? It's 1967. It will be 20-some years, 22 years before you'll hear the term quantum mechanics. At age 7, I was working quantum mechanics, doing it all with the math and papers. So, I'm working on the mathematics of this thing, and it gets a little strange because I can't figure out some of the theorems on this thing, and I can't build an algorithm model. So, let me give you an appreciation of environment, okay? There are no faxes, no cellulars, no pagers, no beepers, no power books, no personal computers, no CD-ROMs, no cable television, no microwave ovens, and it'll be another 10 years before Texas Instruments builds the first handheld calculator. All I have is pencil and paper and chalkboards and a thing called a slide ruler. Anybody remember those? I see some hands. Well, anyway, which, by the way, I went at a yard sale. Do you remember the giant yellow one that was in a classroom that could pull that thing around? I found one for $5. I got that thing hanging over my shop. And they go, what is that? Well, I know how old you are now. So, especially when girls ask me that, watch out, I'll get you. So, I'm working on this stuff, and I can't do the calculations. It's just too taxing. It's too far out for the algorithms to hold the model and contain this field. Because what I want to do is build an artificial black hole. I can do that with dual cyclotrons, and I came up with a particle accelerator. Well, when the feeding system of the plasma drives, I don't want to go into it too detailed, but what that does is it creates an electromagnetic force field containment area that is the same intensity of a black hole. What does the black holes do? They swallow suns and they disappear and you never see them again. Obviously, you have a containment vessel for that power. Works pretty good, only if you can get the loop to close, and I couldn't. So my science teacher, could you imagine having me for a kid for a science class? I'm in 7th grade at the time. He looks at this work and goes, what is this? And I said, I'm working on my math on this rocket. Well, see, they dropped me out of algebra because I couldn't do it. And so he's looking at this. He goes, you want to work some of this for me? I said, sure, look at this. And he's going, geez. So can I borrow this for a minute? So he borrowed it and went to Ohio State University. I'm in Mount.
A global scramble is underway to identify and perhaps replicate unidentified mystery material that's been collected in multiple sites around the world.
A few of the samples have defied analysis by leading scientists who say they don't know how the material was engineered or why or by whom.
Now, some of this meta material was allegedly collected in connection with UFO incidents, which gives the whole endeavor another worldly glow. The I-Team's George Knapp has the story and the Las Vegas connection.
Multi-layered bismuth and magnesium sample. Bismuth layers less than a human hair. Magnesium samples about 10 times the size of a human hair. Supposedly picked up in the crash retrieval of an advanced aerospace vehicle.
In Las Vegas back in June, physicist Hal Puthoff came pretty close to saying that this weird wedge of metamaterial came from a crashed saucer, but he can't know for sure. Puthoff and his colleague Dr. Eric Davis are on the cutting edge of attempts to identify an assortment of bits and pieces that are seemingly beyond anything we can create. This one sample is engineered in layers thinner than microns through a process unknown on Earth, and for a purpose we can only guess.
Nowhere could we find any evidence that anybody ever made one of these. When we talked to people who, in the materials field, who should know, they said, we don't know why anybody would want to make anything like this.
In order to appreciate the gravity of what was just explained in the previous clip, I believe we have to define the term micron for those of you not familiar with it. A micron or micrometer is 1/1,000,000th of a meter. So small that a human hair, which is about 50 to 100 microns thick, seems massive in comparison. At this scale of measurement, light waves, which range from 400 to 700 nanometers, interact strongly with structures, and quantum effects can begin to emerge. Metamaterials exploit these precise dimensions, arranging features at the micron and submicron scale to manipulate electromagnetic waves in ways nature never intended. As an engineer myself, these compelling materials would enable essentially the impossible, including invisibility cloaks, super lenses, and materials with negative refractive indices. Control at the micron level doesn't just reshape materials. It rewrites the rules of physics from what we've come to learn.
And you're lucky you even heard me. But Art, he's a character, man. He had to ask all kinds of questions. So what was life like for me when I was growing up? Well, let me kind of give you an idea. The first rocket I built, I was 12 years old, the one that I launched, the very first one. The engine is a liquid-fueled type rocket. It has little cryogenic pumps in it where we're pumping a fluid 400 below zero. Okay, can you imagine handling that stuff? So you might heard on our belt, well, how did you have such access to things? Well, my dad worked for a guy named Lee Petty, and he has a son named Richard. I don't know if you ever heard of these guys. No? Well, yes, Winston Cup about 100 times. They're the most famous race car drivers on Earth, and they drive these stock cars. And my dad worked for them about 20 years. So they had state-of-the-art high-performance machine shops, bigger than this. And if you knock all the walls out in this building, it's twice the size of this building. So huge machine shops, and these machine shops are built for one thing. What? Speed. So I'm looking at all this, and I'm 12 years old. My dad's having me overhauling 426 Chrysler Hemis. I could overhaul one of them things in 3.5 hours. Talk to a garage next time. Well, this guy can do them in 3 hours. It'll be 3 weeks, buddy, before we can get your car back. So we could do everything fast, but I could really do these engines. With 2 4-barrels on these engines, they turn 675 horsepower. Pretty big engines. And I'm 12 years old, and I'm learning to do that. And the honer weighs more than I do to get them in blocks. That's how can you end up something like that. So anyhow, during the day I would work on these things, and everybody goes home, and what do I have laying there as far as the eye can see? All of these presses and lathes and machines, which I now know how to run. Also, the fuels in this building. They have things called fuelie, drag racers. We have methane, nitro, liquid oxygen, liquid hydrogen. We have kerosene. We got gasoline. I mean, man, you know, basement farmer dream. I can do anything in here. So the petties let me work in there, and they said, "Whatever you do, Dave, don't blow up the place, okay?" So I built my first rocket, and I took it home, and it was about this tall. And I set it up in the backyard. My little friends come over. We're all 12-year-old kids stand there. Now, most of us aren't even allowed to play with matches. Okay, I don't need a match, believe me. So all my friends have never seen me launch anything. They hear me talk about it and stuff. I said, "Well, build this thing." So they're standing there, and they're looking for a 4th of July rocket. Psh, psh, that's it. I backed everybody up, and we backed up about the length of a football field. And they're going, "You're kidding." I said, they stand this far when they light a little bottle rocket and watch it go. I said, "I don't think you guys want to be standing that close when this thing goes." So they kind of know I'm strange anyhow. So they get behind trees and stuff like that. And I like this thing. And I do it remote control, wireless, just poof. When I hit a detonation, it goes off. It leaves the backyard, y'all, 3,500 miles an hour. Burns a hole the size of this room in the yard. Down to the roof. Thank you. I turned around and looked at my friends, right? Nothing but dust and little particles in the air like a cartoon. It's ping. My mother comes running out of the house. This thing you can hear 4 miles away. She runs out there and she looks at the yard just incinerated, smoking. So she sees this white thing going straight to the sky, and she just goes. And I'm standing there looking at her, and I go. So my mom looks back at me and she goes, "Where's your friends?" And I went, "Somewhere in the next county by now." I didn't see them for a week. They said they told me I was going to be beaten to next week. But anyhow, that thing's still huffing and puffing. The altimeter I had hooked onto it, 120,000 feet. That's ionosphere, folks. That's the last band of layer of atmosphere on the planet. It's about to go space out of my backyard. So I had it timed where it could come back in, delayed charge. I was counting the seconds like that, and then the wind shift and drift, and finally it comes back into sight. Parachutes come out, and the thing just starting to drift down, and I walk about from here to the back door and just catch it, and I had to let go of it real quick. It was so hot. But so while I'm standing there, we're watching it float back down to me, and I asked my mom, I said, "God, I am so weird. I'm not like everybody else. What is this?" And she looks at me and she goes, "Well, I'll tell you something. You didn't come from me, you came through me." It wasn't until 30-some years later with the metaphysic crowd that I figured out what my mom was trying to tell me. So, and then I was really worried. So, that was the first time we built a rocket. So you ask, well, how do you know how high up it went? It's real simple. You take a protractor. You ever seen them things, little half moon thing? You glue it to a board. You take a stick this long, screw it into the board, put 2 little eyelets on it, look through it like a rifle, and follow the rocket. You measure 500 feet from the pad. The cosine in trigonometry and table is cosine 1. Multiply that by 1 times 500, and then you get the reading off the protractor. Figure that into the calculation. Do your second clocks, and guess what? Altitude and speed you have in your hand. Now, the reason I make that point, it cost me $5.30 to make all this. NASA had the same thing at $12 million. And we both get the same accuracy. So, talk about overkill. On what? That's it. Well, you got to pay all these guys when you have 5 people sharpening pencils, at $40 an hour. So anyhow, that was the beginning of everything, and the rocket took off. Well, my mom and dad figured, it's time. My dad was practical, although he was. I was born in West Virginia. I was born in number 10 Pocahontas coal fields. I'm about 15th generation coal miner son. Glad to be a coal miner son. Anyway, so anyhow, my dad was a functional literate. He only went to 5th grade, but boy, he could build engines. So he also a very clear thinking person. You know, first thing he did after he came home, he saw the yard. And then he walked over to me and said, I guess you don't want to mow grass too much, do you? And he asked me, he's very quick to the point, where did you assemble and prep this thing? And I went, in the basement. He goes, uh-huh. So first thing Dad did, we got up early next morning and everything was moved out of the basement to about 500 yards away to this big old service station we used to have. And he set a huge machine shop up in there for me so I could use. So he told my mother, he said, well, Vanjie, if he blows up this time, he won't launch the house with us in it. The building will disintegrate. We'll just put a big stone over there. This is David, our son, who used to be here. So, but Dad was pretty cool. But now I had a big machine shop, and I mean, it had a full bathroom in it and a little bed area. And I lived there. Did not live with my parents. I lived in this place. And I'm 12 years old. I'm odd, y'all. So I started building these rockets, and the rockets got bigger, bigger, and faster. And I was all the time calling FAA for flight tables. You know why I'm doing that? I don't want to go punching a hole in the belly of an Easterner, you know, airliner going over. So at the time where everybody's at in the sky and go, boom, shooting things up to it. And FAA people going, what is this weird blip on the screen? Nothing moves 4,500 miles an hour now, you know. And at that time, in the late 60s, UFO flap, like some kind of UFO, look at that, boom. But, and it was irregular. Hell yeah, the irregular. That's why I was shooting in between the airliners. So, anyhow, things were happy until something happened. I wasn't satisfied with these engines anymore. Got to build something bigger now. So, right about when I'm about 13, I come up with this idea of building a new type of engine. It's called a fusion magnetic containment engine. Now, most people really go, oh, that's nice. Well, let me give you some appreciation, okay? Imagine if I said, let's take a hydrogen warhead, like 100 megaton, that if it went off right here in this room with us, you won't have to worry about it. But people about 2 miles away, it'll blow a hole 2 miles in diameter and 1,000 feet deep. It'll raise the temperature to about 100 million degrees centigrade. Now we're going to take all that force and power, and we're now going to put it inside, appropriately, we're going to put it inside a bottle and contain it. Right, sure. So that's exactly what this engine does. Now, how can it? This sounds stupid. It can't possibly be true. And that's 3D rocket scientist people tell me that. I'm like, oh yeah? Well, check this out. There's only one thing that we know of that can bend light and space and time out in space, and only one thing we know of that can swallow a sun that disappears, and that's called a black hole. And thanks to a little guy named Stephen Hawkins, we were able to come up with quantum mechanics, in which he now proved that these theories are now fact. Well, but you got to know something. You know what year this is? It's 1967. It will be 20-some years, 22 years before you'll hear the term quantum mechanics. At age 7, I was working quantum mechanics, doing it all with the math and papers. So, I'm working on the mathematics of this thing, and it gets a little strange because I can't figure out some of the theorems on this thing, and I can't build an algorithm model. So, let me give you appreciation of environment, okay? There are no faxes, no cellulars, no pagers, no beepers, no power books, no personal computers, no CD-ROMs, no cable television, no microwave ovens, and it'll be another 10 years before Texas Instruments builds the first handheld calculator. All I have is pencil and paper and chalkboards and a thing called a slide ruler. Anybody remember those? I see some hands. Well, anyway, which, by the way, I went at a yard sale. Do you remember the giant yellow one that was in a classroom that could pull that thing around? I found one for $5. I got that thing hanging over my shop. And they go, what is that? Well, I know how old you are now. So, especially when girls ask me that, watch out, I'll get you. So, I'm working on this stuff and I can't do the calculations. It's just too taxing, it's too far out for the algorithms to hold the model and contain this field. Because what I want to do is build an artificial black hole. I can do that with dual cyclotrons, and I came up with a particle accelerator, or when the feeding system of the plasma drives, I don't want to go into it too detailed, but what that does is it creates an electromagnetic force field containment area that is the same intensity of a black hole. What does the black holes do? They swallow suns and they disappear and you never see them again. Obviously, you have a containment vessel for that power. Works pretty good, only if you can get the loop to close, and I couldn't. So my science teacher, could you imagine having me for a kid for a science class? I'm in 7th grade at the time. He looks at this work and goes, what is this? And I said, I'm working on my math on this rocket. Well, see, they dropped me out of algebra because I couldn't do it. And so he's looking at this, and he goes, you want to work some of this for me? I said, sure, look at this. And he's going, geez. So can I borrow this for a minute? So he borrowed it and went to Ohio State University. I'm in Mount Vernon, Ohio at this town. And he showed the work to these guys in physics lab there, and they looked at it and go, where did you get this work? And it's in personal handwriting. Where'd you get Hawking's work? And they go, it's not Hawkins, it's this kid out here in Ohio in the cow fields launching rockets. So they look at this and they go, holy smokes. So they photocopy it. There's no email, no faxes. They put it in an envelope, put a stamp on it, and mail it. And it goes to Cambridge, England. In 3 weeks, there's a man at Ohio State that my science teacher takes me to meet, and he's working on some projects with a thing called Battelle Memorial. And I walk into the room, and there's this enormous calculation. We had big blackboards, big as this room, imagine going all the way around the room. So I walk in, I see all these calculations. The first thing I go is, who's got my work and messing with it, you know? This little guy on a cane stands up and he goes, your work indeed. I go, yeah. And I went, wait a minute. That's not my work. Besides, it's not right over there anyhow. He goes, really? You want to show me? Sure. Walk over there. Okay, wait. So anyway, write this stuff out. They look at it. He looks at it. And he goes, how do you qualify that? I go, rocket engine. And he goes, and he's looking at the connecting math I made, because what's interesting about his mathematics and mine, we're on parallel roads. He wants the theorems on all the black holes to show physically in physics how the mathematical equations can such a thing can exist. I'm a little bit beyond that. I just want a physical one built, 3D reality right here, and want to punch a hole in one end and let the power out. And he's going, oh man. So he's working on his stuff, and he asks, where are you getting all these equations from? And I went, oh boy, here we go. I went, dreams. Every night. And he drops the chalk. And I'm standing there going, that's the end of this conversation. I guess I'm out of here. So he turned around, and I'm already walking to the door. And he goes, wait a minute. He goes, everything I get in my math comes from dreams. We dream on the same wavelength. Therefore, your brothers have a seat. And we start working. So the equations we could only come to because of the algorithms, still we didn't have the computer power that we needed. We could get the field to hold for 5 seconds. Let me tell y'all, 5 seconds with a rocket engine is an eternity. That's plenty of time. So I left there and I went back to do some more testing. Now let me tell you about my test area. What are y'all laughing about? So, well, yeah, see, I'm out of the backyard. You're very, very observant. And not only am I out of the backyard, my launch site And now me and my lab has been moved about 1,000 yards away for blast reasons. I'm waiting for my dad to start building a big wall there for shrapnel debris when it goes off. But we had farmers. The farmers really interested in the area. They were very understanding. And these guys were in their 60s, and it's now 1967. And something's been on TV for about 6 months. It's called Star Trek, the original episode. These old farmers were the hardcore trekkers you could ever meet. I couldn't believe it. And anyhow, their 4 farms, like this big screen, if you made like a window pane, came in 4 sections. They put me dead center in it. So I was surrounded by private property in all 360-degree radius. Pretty good place to have it. Then they took a backhoe and dug out this big pit and had a dirt ramp in there. And down this pit, I'm about 20 feet down, but about the height of this wall. And the reason why, my engines didn't always work, y'all. They'd explode. And they can make a real mess. So I didn't want to hurt these cows. So we built that down so I launch out like a silo. So I'm down in this pit. I'm working. And while I'm working on all these rockets, I look up, and completely around the circle of the pit is all these cows. And they're chewing away. You know, watching me do my thing. They go, that's cool. You know, they're watching. So I look up. It's like an OR room, you know, with an amphitheater. I got all the, how y'all doing, you know? So I'm working on rockets. They got to know me really well. If I walked out of the pit slowly, they'd all turn around and walk off. If I come running out of the pit, they all ran. So, hey, cows aren't dumb as you think they are. They're pretty smart animals. If that boy's running, leave, because there's going to be this big thing coming up out of there right after behind him. So they're used to seeing fireballs. So anyhow, I decided that when I get ready to launch, I'd come out of the pit and I'd go to my launch booth area. They'd all move over and actually herd into a crowd. And when a rocket go out of there, I could look over, and if I'd lose sight of it, I could watch where their heads are and pick up the sight. Because they'd all go like this. 200 cows doing that. I got some pictures you wouldn't believe. Somebody go, how'd you get on cows to do that, you know? My secret. So anyhow, I got to know these cows really well. And, pardon? Yeah. If NASA loses tracking device, they need to get some cows out there. They'll find it. They got great eyesight. So anyhow, they were pretty calm. So I tried a new rocket. This is a staging rocket, 2-stage. It has an engine on top and an engine on the bottom. All right? So this thing comes out of the pit, and it is just getting it. I mean, it's probably the fastest one I've built yet. When it gets right at the opening of the pit, which we call a vent horizon, it gets right at the opening, the second engine ignites. Both engines are now running. It blows the first stage back down to the pit, and it explodes in a fireball that comes back up. This is all in a millionth of a second. It knocks the rocket over on its side, even with the ground. And it is skipping, and it is just, I mean, it's a streak with a fire tail about the size of a semi behind it, and it's heading dead center for this herd of cows. And I'm standing there. It was the fastest prayer I ever got out in my life. Oh, God, save the cows, you know. No sooner I could get that spit out, boy, the thing just did a nosedive in the ground, and now it's shaking. Fuel tank rusher blows up. Huge fireball, size of a school bus. Blows up, and those cows are like from here to that wall. And I can look through the fireball, and I'll see it right now clear as ever. Their eyes, they're this big. And I'm standing there like, well, what's next? You know, next they did a perfect, just like in the Army, 180 degrees turn, all of them simultaneously. Boom, stampede. I thought, okay, good, they didn't get hurt. However, on a far side herd, looking the other direction, is this one cow that didn't see anything. So she disappears under the crowd. I went, oh, God. So I run over there. That cow is really bad looking. It's every bone, its body's broke. It's dead. It's just. So I'm sitting there going, oh, God, I've killed this cow. Well, here come all the farms and trucks heading up there. It's the farmers. Of course, they saw this giant fireball, and it sounded like a clap of thunder on a clear day. Must be David. So they ran up there. First thing they said, "You all right?" "Yeah, I don't think this cow's too good." And they looked at that cow and they go, "That cow's dead." You know, I went. So they said, "Go back to they sent somebody back with a front end loader and come back and pick this cow up." They said, "You got to come back to the barn." I thought, "Oh God, I've lost my launch area. I'll never get to use this site. Oh man." And they're going to be upset. So I get back there and they take a chain hoist, put it around the cow's neck, and they hoist it up. And they tell me, "Well, normally we take these things to the slaughterhouse, but we don't have time because blood will coagulate in the meat. So we got to do this quick." And they said, "You got to dress this cow." And I'm standing there and I'm going, why would I want to put a dress on this cow? Two of the farmers swallowed their plugs. Tobacco. And they are laughing. And no sooner than I said that, I hear this thing behind me, and I turn around and they hand me this chainsaw. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this out. Oh God. And I had to cut this cow. I'm up to my shoulders in this thing, digging out everything. And I'm turning every color of the rainbow. And the guy comes by with amber in his mouth. "You want a chaw?" Oh boy, they were having a great time. But the end of the story was, this is a black Angus cow, about 900 pounds, expensive animal. We ended up with a third of that cow for free in our freezer, and they didn't charge us anything. So my dad came home and goes, "That's not a bad day's work. You brought home a third of a cow." I said, "Yeah, but I tell you what, I'll work all the overtime you want in that shop to buy you a steak because I am not going to dress another cow." So anyhow, that's pretty much how I endured life with the cows out where I launched stuff. Now back to current science here, but I thought you might appreciate that. Let's jump. And let's see, to the space station. Does anybody know the name of the United States space station they're trying to get built? No? Freedom. Boy, you're doing better than the average audience, but there is another one. Yeah, well, it's not settled yet. Politics are still working on it. Yeah, the thing is the way they do the budgets, that's calling that. When we used to have the name up for Freedom, the in-house, maybe they changed it because we made an in-house joke. They can't ever seem to get the budget funding on this thing right. So we told them, if we ever get the station up, we'd have Freedom at last. So, but they may have changed it. I haven't been paying attention because I don't even talk to them. Yeah. Boy, I choke up every time I think about the space station. Let me tell you a story about funding with the space station. I was in an open hearing. This was 10 years ago. And they came in, NASA did, and they laid the budget in front of the Senate Subcommittee on Science and Technology. And they said that this space station would cost around 35 to 40 billion. Some of us come up out of our seats, but nobody wanted to say anything. When the actual GSA and the OMB audit came out on this thing, it's $180 billion. A little slight difference. So Congress doesn't believe anything NASA submits, so they get into a big tug of war. So they have to do an R&D study, and that's where it got to be fun. They came up with a final study and a prototype that's set in a corner of the room over there. It looks like a big, ugly erector set. And the bill was $2 billion for this study. And you end up with an 8th grade erector set design. You gotta be kidding. Well, anyway, they tore that up and started over again. And you're paying for this. And it's all in the congressional records. They still haven't really got the designs right. And so the point to all this is I'm not sure when we're going to get the station up. They keep giving you a timeline that keeps slipping back, and you don't know what you're going to get. They keep redesigning, recutting. So for sake of argument, let's say that we're going to get something like this, which is called the string of linked sausages design. And that thing right there, that sausage link, is actually about the size of a single wide mobile home house trailer. So you pull it out and unscrew the caps, hook them together, the beam extender rolls out, put out your solar power blanket, and you got enough power there to house about 24 people year round. And it would look like something like this. Most people see that and go, a space diner. No, that's not what it is. There's a space habitat module there, and you have your supplies and avionics, life support systems on the upper and lower decks, and then you have the space that you'd work in, and here's where you'd have all the different stuff that you'd be working and personal hygiene, and now they have a regular commode up there. That's important. If you go to the bathroom, you're not going to use diapers now, would you? So, do you know anything?
I've analyzed several of the objects that he's removed over the years. There's just an incredible difference between strongly suspecting that something like this is true and knowing for sure. I feel like I know for sure at this point. It completely changes the paradigm with which you view the world, knowing that this information is really the truth. I think that we need to get this information out to the general public, let people know that there is a much larger world out there beyond what the standardized, sanitized textbooks and the media and government are telling us. I work in the carbon nanotube field.
Let's take a minute to cover carbon nanotube technology, so everyone watching understands the gravity of the presentation you're about to review on alien implant analysis from the presentation from MUFON. I want you all to imagine a material 100 times stronger than steel, that's lighter than a feather, and more conductive than copper, all while being less than the thickness of a human hair. That's what carbon nanotubes are, and why they are one of the most exciting breakthroughs in science. These carbon nanotubes are tiny tubes made of carbon atoms that are rolled up like a straw. Think of them as super straws with supernatural level powers, like being stronger than diamonds, allowing us to engineer
This system has a
unbreakable
lot to teach
materials.
us. It heals broken branches, self-organizes, and can even be taught to play a simple game of Tetris.
DARPA aims to refine this technology to connect individual neurons. This would give much finer control, reduce noise, and speed up communications between a human and a computer. DARPA's website confirms the news, also citing that among the program's potential applications are devices that could compensate for deficits in sight or hearing by feeding digital, auditory, or visual information into the brain at a resolution and experiential quality far higher than possible with current technology.
And faster than silicon, allowing us to engineer computers 1,000 times faster than the fastest system today. This technology was derived from sources out of this world.
But it just so happened to turn out that these objects contain carbon nanotubes, probably as the electronics of the devices. These objects gave quite large carbon nanotube signatures. Of course, we had the pathology reports done on the objects to show that they had no inflammation, which is a highly unusual thing. It's almost unheard of, or it is unheard of, for human-made objects put into the human body to not produce any type of a reaction at all. The immune system always reacts to the presence of a foreign body, except in the case of these alien implants. The aliens apparently have the technology to completely circumvent the immune response, and if we had this technology, we could greatly enhance our organ transplantation and medical technology in general. It's my hypothesis that these carbon nanotubes in this device acted as the electronics, micro-miniature, nanoscale electronic system. This is one of the pieces of the object because it turned out to be made of meteoric iron. This shiny surface was quite unusual, and that later turned out to be something similar to mother of pearl or bone or some biological hard part. We also found some very unusual structures inside the metallic portion of the piece, nanocrystals. We hypothesized that perhaps these crystals were the source of the radio waves that we saw. They may have been used to produce various frequencies of radio waves, like some of the old crystal sets. And these pits were all over the metal as well. These appear to be deliberately introduced nanostructures. I've never seen anything like this before. The evidence was pretty clear that this was a nano-engineered device. They found these strange pores in the metal that almost look like They may have been passageways for capillaries. If so, then perhaps it's a port in the device to allow real-time analysis of the patient's blood. Here we see the object just after removal at 40 times magnification, and it had this capsule of tissue around it with these yellow vesicles that turned out to be of a strange oil. Here's a blood vessel here, and there were proprioceptor nerves all throughout this volume. Here's the inner metallic object. This black is a black non-hydrated iron oxide. Here's the metallic object, metallic portion of the object at higher magnifications. Here's 100 times, 200 times, 500 times. And these pits were extremely interesting. These pits in this cottage cheese type surface were all over the surface of the object, and that appeared to be some sort of a manufactured thing as well, since these structures were much too uniform to be naturally occurring. I'd never seen anything like that either. It was just mind-blowing. After one really interesting thing is after removal from the tissue, the object was cut in half. I tried to cut it using Dykes, and that didn't work. I tried a file, that didn't work either. And so I called Roger and said, "Roger, I can't cut this thing." And so he took it to a machine shop. They tried Diamond Tools, and Diamond Tools would not cut it. I suspected at that point the material was an advanced iron carbon nanotube metal matrix composite. The machine shop said it was the hardest stuff they'd ever seen. It appeared much harder than anything I've ever seen before in my life. And the object was successfully cut finally using a high-power laser. Here you see half of the object after the cut. The nanotubes appeared to be dispersed very evenly in the metal. Here's one of these nanofiber bundles I was talking about that appeared to be the main connections to the device. They're about 10 microns across and extend for several millimeters sometimes in some of the ones I've seen. The coating kind of had a rough surface and had these pits. Here's a good shot of one of the pits and grooves that were on part of the coating. A very unusual shell-like structure. And here's a close-up of one of the pits. They had these central things like a central peak of a crater from the moon or something. It's pretty certain that they must function as nanoelectronics, because otherwise the objects could not have been emitting radio waves. Both of them were emitting radio waves prior to removal, and a couple of the frequencies turned out to be deep space communication frequencies. It appears to be manufactured iron alloy carbon nanotube metal matrix composite. The coating contains pits and nanofibers, and these are probably related to the function of the device. The nanofibers may be CNT wires, and the presence of the nanostructures, carbon nanotubes, protective oil vesicles, and nerve fibers growing into the object indicate that this is also a manufactured nanotechnological device. I'd hypothesize that the John Smith object may have been some sort of health monitoring device to have the aliens monitor the state of John Smith's health and chemicals in his bloodstream in real time. This object probably functioned more along the lines of transmitting information on what the subject was doing. It turned out to be meteoric iron. It was mostly iron. The metallic portion was mostly iron. It turned out there was a lot of gallium and germanium. That's pretty much a smoking gun for it being meteoric iron. These things often have a lot of iridium, platinum, palladium, ruthenium. It had some rare earths in it as well, like praseodymium, europium, cerium. Here's the very interesting part. Indicates that this metal did not come from our solar system. Every element on Earth has a certain pattern of isotopes, and in elements heavier than carbon, they only vary by a fraction of a percent, maybe 0.5% at most. If it varies by much more than that, then it's definite that it came from off the Earth. We're seeing percentages of variation of well over 2%. Here we're seeing a 3% variation in copper-63 and 3% in copper-65. Dr. Kuntz, our colleague, did an analysis and came to the conclusion that from the boron data that this came from a solar system that began its evolution approximately 80 million years in advance of ours. Here's our scientific conclusions about this object. The iron appears to be meteoric in origin, and there's numerous features in the implant, such as biological tissue, sodium chloride orthorhombic nanocrystals of varying size, carbon nanostructures like nanofibers, nanoribbons, nanotubes, and unknown structures and networks like the pores in the metal. The similarity to biological material of the outer coating may be responsible for the patient's lack of immune response to the object. That gray outer membrane appears to be a electrically conductive proteinaceous membrane that's very tough to cut through, that maybe the interface between the device itself and the nervous system. The main connections of the device appear to be large carbon nanotube bundles, like little wires almost, about 10 microns in diameter. And those apparently connect to the gray outer membrane. And the inclusions have unusual shapes, which suggest artificiality and functionality. And this, along with the fact that the object was emitting radio signals before removal, strongly indicates that this is a manufactured nanotechnological device having a definite purpose. The isotopic ratios have been compared to known isotopic ratios of elements in our solar system, and as I say, they're not the same. This material may not be from the solar system.
It weighs less than styrofoam of the same size and is crystal clear. Welcome to Transsteel, the 21st century. What good would that be? With this process, there's a way for me to take it down to a fiber system. Well, what good is that? You got your little girl, she just came over to you, you zip her up in her little jumpsuit that weighs no more than my shirt. She goes out and plays in the front yard. She gets caught in a gangland crossfire. She's hit about 6-7 times by a 9mm soft-nose hollow point. She goes down from the impact. She gets up crying because they feel like bee stings. She comes running in and hands these things to you that looks like pennies. It's the bullets that flattened out on her jumpsuit, body armor. Other processes we could do with this: your car blows front tire, everybody's strapped in, you roll over and over, the glass doesn't break. Other applications? There's one in every crowd, buddy. Because I hadn't gotten a good year with it yet. These are all applications, and there's more applications than I could possibly think of. But you could really do some tremendous technological jumps here with this type of technology, and it will be occurring. However, another thing that the metal did, that's the speaker grid at the top, speaker grid at the bottom. When metal is injected into an environment, because of surface cohesion tension, they turn into perfect spheres. Any liquid will. So imagine a metal ball that is an absolute perfect sphere. So there's this company named Timken. Anybody ever heard of them? Oh, really? That's right. They make ball bearings. They wanted to make bearings in space because with the surface tension, something happens. When these alloys are pressed under press loads, stress loads, and tension, the metal does something when it's heating up, when it's rubbing with each other. It has no grease or oil, and it self-lubricates each other far beyond the specs oil could ever achieve. So what you're talking about is greaseless bearings. So an Amtrak can go 90 miles an hour through downtown Des Moines, don't lock up a bearing, decide to do a right-hand turn, go through Main Street, which gets everybody excited. Another thing that this stuff can do for this type of metal, that means you could make something else. So enter this other company. They want to make cylinder wall sleeve pistons and rings and main bearings, bring them back, assemble them on Earth to an automobile engine. They could guarantee you 500,000 miles on this engine without needing a drop of oil. That company is called BMW, your West German automaker. So they'll be running that experiment very soon. Now, let's talk about a medical arena. On the medical arena, we're getting into a lot of stuff. As a matter of fact, I was minding my business one day, if you can believe that, and in walked these people from Johnson & Johnson. They worked for a subdivision called Ortho Pharmaceutical. Have you ever been to pharmacies and seen Ortho? They make KY jelly and other useful and strange products. So anyway, I said, okay, guys, I know what you guys do. And they said, look, we have a bio division. We would like for you to build an electrophoretic processor that could work in the microgravity of space. Can you do that? Sure. So anyway, they left, and we worked out some paperwork. Finally, I asked somebody, and went, what is an electrophoretic processor? So we did our homework. All the hospitals on Earth use them. And you have a thing here, like a rectangular screen, and it stands like say something. How many people in here ever ordered an ant farm? Nobody ordered an ant farm? I see hands. You just don't want. There's some hands. Yeah, I ordered an ant farm. I don't know about y'all, but every time my ants came in, they were all dead. So no, it's not too bad. So being in Georgia, I put ants in my ant farm. Fire ants. Nobody messed with my ant farm. So anyhow, it's shaped like it's shaped like an ant farm screen. In it is a solution like saline. You dump in the enzymes and hormones. You fire an electrical charge through it. The enzymes and hormones get too hot for the electrons and chase them like Pac-Man. Some run faster and slower than others. You get a layer effect, and that is how you separate enzymes and hormones here on Earth to manufacture vaccines and serums. Okay, not so hard to understand. However, every hospital on Earth has a problem with its processing unit. At the bottom of the grid, it looks like an old 60s lava lamp, like oil and water. It will not separate. You can fire a billion volts there, it will not separate. So, the medical scientist at Ortho said there's something in that solution. So we built a processor, had McDonnell Douglas interface it with Discovery shuttle. We put it in the aft cargo bay of the shuttle. A civilian astronaut named Charlie Walker went in and fired this thing up. It cleared all the way to the bottom on the first pass, and there they found what they were looking for. Actually, they found more than what they were looking for. They found these hormones. These hormones are 4 times larger and 700 times purer than anything existed on Earth. Once they're separated, they'll stay separated, bring back into a gravity field. They went to Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. Then Channel 5 came on and said, those of you who live in the Emory area, there's a test program for those of you whose pancreas doesn't produce beta cells, more commonly known as diabetes. A lot of people showed up. They picked out 4 people in their 20, 40, 60, and 80 year bracket. These are class 2 diabetics. They gave them an intravenous injection, and in about 12 to 16 hours, this thing has a genetic encoder so pure, and they can send it like a roadmap. It goes straight into the pancreas with a encoded instruction sheet on this thing. And when it got there, it started catalytic conversion. All of a sudden, these 4 people's pancreas started producing beta cells. They've laid their needles down and hadn't had a shot in 6 years. So, now, you're sitting there going, well, that can't be. We hadn't heard anything about it on national news. You're absolutely right, for 2 reasons. First reason, Johnson & Johnson paid $227 million for that flight. Gives it the authority to lock it up under proprietary law. Why? Oh, they're so mean. No, they're not. They did it for reason number 2. Have you ever tried to do a manufacturing process in the back seat of your car? That's what it's like on board a space shuttle. You need a space factory. 2x, 3 times the size of this building, so you can make enough inoculation serums to take out states at a time and not just 4 people. Until you have a space factory where you can manufacture it, there's no need to get you wound up because we can't deliver the product. So it's kind of a tough situation. But what is curious, did anybody see last week what Clinton did? He gave $2 billion for research to diabetes. And we're staring at the cure, but we can't get things organized enough to build a space factory, so we can't do this type of processing. We can't get this product into the field for you to get rid of a dreaded disease. And it gets better. At a debriefing system I was in with this thing, I said, hey guys, how much is this stuff going to cost? Anybody thought about that? Oh yeah, Johnson ready. Oh, about 60, maybe 80,000 for a shot. I went, God, I guess they're going to die of diabetes, aren't they? There was another group of people go, no, they won't. We'll pay for it. I went, who are you guys, Daddy Warbucks? And they go, we're the insurance underwriters, all of them. Big Aetna, Blue Cross, Blue Shield, all of them. I said, oh, you're so generous. And I went, let me think about this a minute. Don't answer. Let's see if I can figure this out. You'll take a person 60, 70 years of their life and they have diabetes. Along with that comes blindness, joint failure, hypertension, blindness. It costs you tens of billions of dollars. So you'll put that in your pocket when you get rid of the disease. Public gets rid of a terrible thing hanging on them. Johnson & Johnson gets a worldwide monopoly cure. So you guys pay for it at normal premium rates with a big smile because you're making tens of billions and you get rid of a dread disease at a normal premium rate. That's science and technology in business moving in the right system. It's what we call where science gets down to business. So it works out that way. But until you have a system, there's nothing we can do about it. Now, you might ask yourself, how come you don't hear about all this on national news? Good question. Do you know where the National Technology Transfer Center of NASA is? I know you think I'm making this up, but you can verify it real easy. The National Technology Transfer Center of NASA's divisions, their address is Jesuit College, Wheeling, West Virginia. What in God's name is the NTTC doing inside a Jesuit college in the middle of nowhere? And I know it's nowhere because I was born just to the south of the place. Well, go ask the Pope of Pork Barrels, Senator Byrd. And that system was moved out of Washington, D.C. into that Jesuit college. Call 1-800-555-1212. Ask for the National Technology Center and Jesuit College in Wheeling, West Virginia, and they'll give you a 1-800 number and you can talk to them. And ask them, what are you guys doing there? See what kind of answer they give you. It's the technology transfer system has been treated like an unwanted stepchild by NASA because a president named John F. Kennedy had wrote an executive order ordering NASA to make available to commercial divisions the science technology that are discovered. They hate that. NASA hates being told anything. Do you know how NASA is built? Do you know how the structure works? Do you know who's in charge of the space program? Gore. The Vice President of the United States is in charge of the space program. It's been that way since one time Dan Quayle ran the space program. So, that's why they can't get their spelling right on the manuals down there. But anyway, it was designed that way by Senator LBJ when he was under President Eisenhower. He got Ike to set that system up, knowing that he will be a VP for sure, which he was. Then he built Houston so he could tell his voters, look what I brought you. Houston's never been needed from day one. You think the Cape can't do what Houston does? Of course they can. It's total redundant. It's politics at its worst. So you had this megalomaniac running around named LBJ that was doing this kind of system. So anyway, that is how the structure of the space program is set. And did you know this? This federal agency answers to no one except the executive office. Tremendous power NASA has. How so? Did anybody see a program called Day One? It lasted 1 month and they took it off the air. Probably didn't surprise me. Did you remember it? I got a tape recording of something. Their first episode of their first session was a story about the FBI. The FBI, this is interesting, the FBI was doing a 5-year, multi-million-dollar undercover probe sting operation on all of the leaders of the space program. You know why? George Jeffs, let's see, now I wouldn't know George, James Beggs. Anybody recognize that name? He's a former head of NASA. His assistant, deputy director, Jesse Moore, was the one that was in power when the Challenger exploded. Tom Brokaw got on there during the funeral and he said James Beggs could not be here. Jesse Moore's in power. James Beggs is having a, forgot what he called it, he was on leave. He's on administrative leave. That was it. Pardon? The administrative leave, what it was, your leader of the space program had been indicted by the Senate. He was buying 7th grade rivets that holds a shuttle together, literally, paying 1st grade price, taking a 50-50 kickback from the supplier. It gets worse, y'all. It's unreal what goes on in the commercial divisions, or actually the bureaucratic divisions of NASA. So anyway, these sting operations were ready to prosecute. NASA walks into the FBI bureau in Washington, D.C., and they just tell everybody, you will squash this investigation. And they were ready to prosecute. And the paper trail goes to the executive office. The investigation was squashed. No charges were filed, all paperwork destroyed. Except for the two agents that did the undercover operations. They were so furious, they quit the bureau. They went to Day One and turned the story over, and they broadcast it. I recorded it, got the tapes. No one has ever brought this up in the national media. But that's a problem, and the power that this agency has. They have an oversight committee. Oversight committee is a subcommittee on science and technology, but they do not control NASA. Only this agency has to report to the executive office. There's not another agency in the federal system that has that system set up, which means they are totally uncontrolled. I think you better start paying a lot more attention to NASA. There is a lot more going on that you don't know about. So, yeah, I'll tell you what, there's just so much stuff on this thing. There's the electronic crystals. I built that. Then systems. You ever seen that? Right there is where we come in the factory. We're now solar power stations. Okay, how big is the solar power station? Take a picture of downtown Chicago. Takes up that much room. Big. Okay, about 50 miles long. Okay, we'll go about that some other time. Anyway, space hospitals. That's interesting. Okay, you think, boy, this guy is cruel, right? No, if you would, I'm going to answer some more questions. This is one program. Let's turn the lights on. I'll go into some other questions. But if you want the rest of this program, which I won't have time. This is an hour and a half program by itself. It's for sale at the back of the room. There are videotapes on it, and you can buy a tape back there. Also, there's a tape on Challenger and Helium-3 and Apollo 13. Also, there's audio tapes back there, and you see the guy in a white shirt that has nice hair, which I don't. So his name's Chris. Now, and that's kind of strange because all my life, I've never sold a single tape or book in my life. I'm too busy doing all this. And finally, I wrote a book. It's 456 pages. I haven't got a publisher yet. I'm still sorting through them. And it's called America's Fall from Space. And it details a lot of stuff like I just told you about NASA and the federal agencies and FBI and all that such. But there's a lot more things there. A lot of this stuff is in it. So if you'd like a copy of my book, I don't have it yet. You fill out a sheet back here, give it back to Chris. We'll put your name on the computer list so we can let you know when the book's coming out and when. Okay? By the way, thanks to Art Bell, and I've gotten so many requests from stuff. The mail person asked me if I was in some kind of solicitation business because I have like 3 bags of mail thrown out in my driveway back in Georgia already. My wife asked me, what are you doing out there? So, I'm going to open it up to questions. There's so much stuff we can go. There's so many different systems. Let's just go into questions and we'll figure out what we can do. Yeah.
If you have any questions, will you come to the back of the room, please?
Yeah. Oh, okay. Oh,
David?
Yes, okay. I see you back there.
I have a question.
Yeah, I am.
I don't know if you want to share this or not, but you told me a very interesting story of Area 51. I mentioned it to a few people, and they're kind of anxious to hear it if you want to tell it.
Okay. Those of you might have heard me on Art Bell, you know the story. How many did not hear me on Art Bell? Yeah, to everybody. Okay, good. It all started back. Do you remember when I built these rockets? Well, I built this electromagnetic fusion containment engine, and it turned out that it worked, and it caused a lot of events to occur in my life. First thing that, remember the big machine shop I had? Okay, so there's facilities and technicians, and that's capability. This is important. A local congressman, my congressman in that area, Melbourne, Ohio, named John Ashbrook, he supplied the funds for this rocket. It was a lot of money, 7 digits, and that was a lot of money back in 1968. he was able to put it through on a National Science Foundation grant where we could do it under educational systems. So another man was brought into the picture after I requested some fuel rods pellets from Oak Ridge, Tennessee. So all of a sudden the congressman went, "My God, what are you building, a rocket? Well, now you ask for nuclear fuel? I mean, geez." So he decided to get somebody else in. At that time, this man's parents, if you look in this man's autobiography called Iron Eagle, his name is Curtis LeMay. Ever heard of him? His parents lived in Mount Vernon, Ohio, and my mother was an LPN and she was their caregiver. So he would be in that town regularly, and he knew my mother. They would talk about all my rockets. So when the congressman came in and asked this LeMay to be a project manager for me, that's what he was. He's civilian. He's former retired 4-star General Curtis LeMay of the United States Air Force, former head of SAC, Strategic Air Command. A little bit of power, y'all. So he also never got over Vietnam. I'm telling you, he's still fighting that battle in his head. But anyhow, he came in, and after they saw the rocket and such, it was funny because when I got to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio, I was living in Mount Vernon. First time LeMay met me, he thought I had a rocket, about this big. And he said, "Oh, you're the kid." Actually, this guy was, it's a long story, and it's all in the book, but you could just imagine, we pull up to a SAC base, Strategic Air Command base. There's this missile on a semi. My dad's driving a semi. I'm riding in the seat next to him. And there's this 1-ton missile sitting on the back of this thing. So we pull up to the gate of a SAC base. The guys in the little scarves and the blue berets and all that, they didn't find it so funny. First thing he did, we come out the gate and jumped up on the running board and said to my dad, "What is this doing out here?" And he said, "My son built it." He says, so the guard looks around my dad, and I'm just saying, I am 17 years old, and I'm going, "Hi." So the guard goes, "Yeah, okay, sure." So he's talking to us. I look in the mirror behind the truck, and here comes all these guys with these MK-16. And they're surrounding the truck. I said, "Hey, Dad, I think I better lighten up here real quick. This guy's looking serious over here." I said, "Why don't you go into the main headquarters there? I'm supposed to see a man named Curtis LeMay, General LeMay." So guard goes, "You?" I went, "Yeah." So why don't you bring the truck in the inner fence area? My dad will stay with the truck. My dad's looking at me. And you take you and a couple of your guys, and we'll all go see LeMay. So we did. So I got in there, and we went down the hall and in this big office, and there's LeMay sitting there. They had, I guess, loaned him an office. But he was sitting at the table, and he looks up, and he goes, "Oh, you're the kid that the congressman said you got some rocket you want to shoot." I said, "Sure." So he said, "Well, we'll go out here. This is secured airspace." I said, "Well, I know that, and but there's still another problem, General." He goes, "We'll clear off some cars off there out of the runway area, and we'll shoot you a little rocket off." And I went, "General, I think we got a problem here. I think you better look out that window. I think you got a handle on this." You don't say things like that to Curtis LeMay, I found out. He looks at me, and I thought all the blood in my body went to my feet. He's a big man, he's a big square-built guy, and I went, he goes, "Huh." And he's got this stogie that's doing one of these numbers all the time. And he walks over to the window and grabs a fistful of blades and just boom, like that. That stogie falls out of his mouth. There's this 18-wheel semi with this missile sitting out there. He turns around and looks at me, and he just grinds his stogie out in the teakwood floor. And he goes, "Everybody out of here." And I am the first one to the door. He goes, "Not you, kid. Park it over here." And the colonels and everybody else left. And one full-board colonel saw his little eagles, went by, and he said, "Bad mistake, kid." I was going, "Oh, God." So I sit down in this chair. It's one of these big old red leather wingback chairs with the buttons in it. and I thought I was being swallowed by a Venus flytrap. I sat down and started to sink into this thing. And he's sitting down, and he comes around the table, he gets him another stogie, he's working on it, and he goes, all right, from the top, tell me how that thing got on this base. And we started talking, and he was upset. And I thought I was going to pee, man. I tell you, he scared me to death. And but I got to talk to him, and he's a really nice guy. And that sounds so strange. 4-star general, had the nuclear might of the planet to vaporize the world, and you go, he's a really nice guy if you just understand him, you know. So anyhow, he was nice, and he sent me to out of Wright-Patterson, my rocket, myself, and a couple other people, Colonel, got on a C-141 Starlifter, and we were sent to White Sands, New Mexico. Now we're going to fly this thing. So it gets a little bit interesting. I was very lucky, and I guess somebody in the military really got something right for a change. This colonel is more than not an administrative colonel. He is a rocket propulsion expert and a full colonel. So he understands things, and I don't have to take all day explaining. I started telling him about the engine. And he goes, you built what? I said, a fusion containment engine. And he goes, you're kidding. I said, come on back here. So we're in the plane, we're back here, and we get in the bay, and we open the, I slide the panels back. He looks at it, and he goes, oh, God, you know. And I said, he said, how old are you? I go, 17. He goes, going on at 92. So he said, that's incredible. He said, how many people know about this? I said, well, that man that scared me to death named LeMay, and you, and I don't know who else, congressman. He goes, a congressman? Oh, God. He said, son, you're in a lot of trouble. I said, what? I just built an engine. He goes, yeah, but you don't know. If we get to White Sands and a black jet shows up, look for people coming off of, they'll be wearing black suits with mirror sunglasses, and they are people coming from DOD. And I went, what in God's name is DOD? You know? And he goes, Department of Defense. Don't ever trust anybody that comes from a place called DOD. So anyway, we get there. We're there for a few hours at White Sands. We're getting the missile unloaded, and we're in the hangar. Here comes a black DC-9, and it lands. Outsteps these people in black suits with mirror sunglasses. Long before Men in Black. So one guy stepped off with him, and he looked different. He was in a little khaki outfit, and he was a small, frail guy, but I recognized who he was because Warner von Braun told me about this guy. And I knew Warner since I was 12 years old. All these rockets are built. So this guy came up to me, and his name is Dr. Arthur Rudolph. Ever heard of him? He is the chief senior architect of the Saturn V engines of the Apollo space program. He came over in Operation Paperclip with Warner von Braun. He was with von Braun at Peenemünde. But let me tell you what a real sweetheart this little guy is. On May 24th, 1985, he was deported back to Munich, Germany by the Mossad, the Secret Service of Israel. There he was placed in a jail in Munich, Germany till he died. He killed 100,000 Czechoslovakian Jews in metalworks in Peenemünde when they were building the V-2 rockets. He'd hang them from rafters. You make one mistake on one engine and I'll hang you. He fed them sawdust and water so the water would expand the sawdust and you keep working until they die.
Special interest. He set a video camera up and left it unattended and caught the UFO as it streaked across the screen in approximately 1 second. Several days later, Martin Allen looked outside. He saw this UFO hovering out over the beach.
The UFO seems to accelerate from a dead hover to blinding speed in nothing flat.
It accelerated from 0 to over 2,000 miles an hour before it exited off the screen.
Another UFO video that was submitted to the Mutual UFO Network appeared to have that same acceleration, but the picture is even clearer. Again, the object hovers without a sound and appears to be a solid reflective sphere. Then, without so much as a shudder, the object streaks out of frame.
Vean eso, mi gente. Hay una luz ahí bien potente. Empezamos a escuchar ruidos. Y vean esto, mi gente. Vean eso. Una luz ahí bien potente, mi gente. ¿Qué es eso? Vean eso, mi gente. Ay, no mames. No mames, no mames, no mames, no mames. De la calle Verónica yo vi que en la parte de allá se veía una luz y como quiera pues yo estaba seguro que la cámara que está ahí la estaba checando, estaba viendo. Verónica le dije, ven, dijo, no, me voy para adentro. Y ella se fue para adentro, abrimos la casa, la puerta se metió, yo me vine aquí, yo traía los dos celulares, uno lo dejé aquí y seguí por aquí. Ustedes pueden ver en la cámara de seguridad que está acá, esa cámara estaba checando todo, como ustedes pueden ver ahí un video. Yo sigo caminando, yo trato de hacerme lo más fuerte posible, sigo caminando y me quedo exactamente aquí, mi gente, en este lugar me quedo yo y les juro que el ser, la cabeza del ser se veía por acá, o sea, muy alta, cama alta. Yo calculo que tenía algunos 2 metros y como ustedes pueden ver, si ustedes checan el video, o sea, que es probable que entre por acá, por allá no creo porque hay unas mecedoras. Entonces, si ustedes ven el video ahí, se van a dar cuenta que se escucha un ruido. Ven, justamente estaba aquí. El ser estaba aquí donde estoy yo. Aquí su cabeza estaba como a 2 metros, mucho más alto que yo mido 1,75. Yo calculo que estaba como a 2 metros. Entonces, todo lo que está pasando.
The 2 incidents you've just reviewed are becoming more frequent around the globe. Going from Florida to Mexico is quite a distance, but the level of consistency in these stories around the world are the same. One can't help but bring up the remarkable similarity to the Angel Kenmore Las Vegas incident, when he explained to the 911 operator that the creatures in his backyard were 9 to 10 feet tall with large eyes. He also explained they were 100% not human.
Imagine this. They brought these German scientists in from Germany, and we got 125 of them, and the other half, almost even split, 120 went to Soviet Union. The superpowers space programs began simultaneously, fed by this one group on the planet, these German rocket scientists. So you have all these German, blonde hair, white hair, blue eyes, German accent. You bring them into America across the Mexican border carrying Mexican green cards. You're a Mexican and that's right. So anyway, you put them out in a remote area in Quonset huts in a desert called White Sands, New Mexico. And that's how the space program got started. The President of the United States in no way is going to carry a war-weary nation that's just endured a war that killed over 50 million people worldwide, that you just brought in the scientists that built the super weapons. Oh, sure, you're going to tell them that. So the space program starts off in a secret. So anyhow, Rudolph comes off the plane. He walks right over to me, and I asked him, hi, who might you be? He goes, my name is Henry Wilkerson. With this German accent, and I'm going, I don't think this guy looks like Henry. I know exactly who he is. So he's not telling me the truth. And then he says, or I asked him, what do you do? He goes, oh, I look at things for friends of mine, little projects. I went, oh, okay. So he said, I understand you have a rocket. I want to take a look at it. I said, do you know anything about rocket engines? He goes, oh, a little bit. Yeah, you lying dog. Anyway, so we get over to the engine, he's on one side of the rocket, I'm on the other. We're right across from each other, and I slide these panel doors back open. And there's this thing. It's the twin cyclotrons. Imagine two octopuses having sex. Two big round things and all this mass of stuff in between. That's what the engine looks like. Okay, simple way to describe it. He looks down at that, and he's got his head down there. So I just lean my head right over into his ear, and I go, in proportional size, this engine has 10,000 times the power of the F-1 Saturn V engines of this Apollo moon rocket, Dr. Rudolph. So he jumps up, man. He's just bone white. He's looking at me. He goes, "Who are you?" You know, I go, "I'm just a kid that launches rockets in Ohio and cow fields." So I didn't talk to him anymore after that. The Air Force came in. We moved the rocket to the pad. The thing's prepped. We're now ready to launch this thing. Well, it takes off. I don't know. Do you want to hear the detailed description of the launch? Or it's okay. This thing is sitting 12 miles away on a pad. And I was thinking to myself, 12 miles. If this force field and the systems don't work correctly, we're going to be staring at a thermal hydrogen fusion reaction, and a chunk of the sun will be setting 12 miles away from us. And I thought, 12 miles, maybe 2 nanoseconds, and it's all over with. Yeah. It won't matter. There'll be a flash, it won't matter. So the colonel's standing next to me, and this thing's getting ready to start. And he asked me, he said, "Have you tested this engine?" And I turned around to him, "How am I going to test an engine like this in a cow field, for God's sake?" Now, this guy's good in propulsion. He's going, "You haven't done a test?" "No, I've ran models, mathematical models and stuff, and it should work." He goes, "That's a first generation of prototype sitting there?" I said, "Yeah." "We're in a countdown in 30 seconds? I went, "Yeah." He's looking, I said, "Look, how many people are on this base?" And he goes, "Oh, God. I just want to know how many lives we're going to take out if it doesn't work." And I said, Colonel Walter, don't worry about it. I tell you what, when the thing detonates out there, see this big white wall behind us? Let's jump up and do this, and we'll make the neatest looking shadow you've ever seen as we are vaporized by the blast. He didn't find that very humorous. Couldn't take a joke. So anyway, hey, the colonel was okay though. So anyhow, this thing preps up and the engines engage, and now we're in ignition sequence, and it detonates. It leaves. All right, I don't even know if that's a proper word for it. Have you ever tried to see a rifle bullet leave a barrel? That's how fast the rocket left. We never saw it. What we did see at the pad was all these flames roaring out, and it's just huge fireballs. And then it went from red to kind of a bluish, then it got kind of clear, and then this next thing happened. You ever seen a welder's arc? So bright you can't look at it. This gigantic welder's arc just flashed, and this white tornado thing appeared instantly, and then this big blast concussion wave is coming out of the pad area, coming across the desert floor at us. And it's moving, and the colonel sees that, and he goes, "Oh, God," and he hits this red button, the alarms go off the base. People turn around and look, and they grab hold of things like trucks. And the blast wave, I'm looking out the window of the bunker and going, "God." So all these people look like flags in the wind. Like that. That lets up, okay? But then the colonel goes, "What's that?" And I went, I have no idea. It's like a white tornado, but it goes all the way to infinity. And I started thinking about what I was seeing, and I knew what happened. Pissalem had left so fast that she ripped a hole in the Earth's atmosphere from the launch pad to space. Like you're looking through a soda straw, that launch pad is looking at the total vacuum of space. Guess what it does? There goes the launch pad, the towers, little equipment, Everything that's not nailed down or bolted about 20 feet in the ground is going up in this white tornado. The vacuum of space is like a soda straw. It's going, just sucking everything up. And that's when the colonel said, "What is that?" And I go, "I think it's a vacuum vortex, you know." And he goes, "What's that?" And I said, "Never mind about that. It's what's going to happen next that you're going to worry about." By that time, the colonel's already going, "Oh, God," and he's looking out there. See, Mother Nature abhors the vacuum. She will slam shut. So just like you hit a little mosquito, pow, Mother Nature slams the atmosphere closed. It will slam at the least point of resistance, the upper atmospheres. So it's closing quickly, and it's like you're running your tubes around a toothpaste.
After 25 years of silence, David Adair, now a space technology transfer consultant, has come forward with his amazing experience inside the military's top secret UFO facility.
I was 13 years old when I built my first rocket, and it left the backyard at about 3,500 miles an hour. I was able to build it out of a construction machine shop that my father owned when he used to work for the mechanics and racing enterprises, and we had plenty of equipment and tools that allow such manufacturing to be done. As a matter of fact, our shop's very similar to a rocket shop in equipment and materials. The rockets kept getting bigger, faster, till finally I was able to get funded by a federal grant by a congressman named John Ashbrook. And with that help, I was able to go ahead and complete a larger rocket with an entirely new type of engine, which was a fusion containment engine. The two primary engines we use today are solid propellant and liquid propellant. There are about 61 different rocket engines of propulsion systems that you could leave this planet with. Two of them are just a solid and liquid fuel. I happen to just pick one out of the other 61 engines to pick from, and I manufactured a magnetic fusion containment engine, which in simple essence is able to create a magnetic field capable of holding a thermal fusion reaction inside, like a chunk of the sun contained in a magnetic bottle. And when you tap that power, it allows you to have tremendous thrust, which is what makes the rocket go forward. And so imagine being able to tap onto the power of the sun for an acceleration factor. So that's a pretty interesting engine design. So once the engine was and the rocket was completed, we obviously couldn't launch it where I was launching smaller rockets, which were out in cow fields in Ohio. So we had to go to White Sands, New Mexico, and that was arranged by the congressman and a consultant at the time who was a retired general named Curtis LeMay. And Curtis LeMay made the arrangements from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio. We rode down to White Sands on a C-141 Starlifter, and when my rocket myself got there, we started prepping it for a launch. At the time that we launched, which was June 20th, 1971, a plane flew in the same day we did, and out stepped these men in black suits with mirror sunglasses, and they're DOD agents. And so DOD was interested in the operation, and they were alerted to it by the Air Force and probably the Congress and whoever else was funding the program. Among those men, there were some NASA officials there that I recognized. They instructed me to send the rocket down 656 miles northwest of there to a precise set of coordinates that they gave me. And I asked them, why are we landing in a dry lake bed in Nevada? And they said, just drop it there. And I said, I can do that. So we fired the rocket, and it was a really success as far as engines go. It was extremely fast. It was so fast you couldn't even see it leave. It's like, you ever try to watch a rifle bullet leave a barrel? That's how fast this engine was. So we landed we were exactly where they wanted it. Then we had to get on a DC-9 from White Sands and leave for the dry lake bed, which is called Groom Lake in Nevada. And I was asking them, do y'all notice that these wheels on your plane, they're rubber tires and landing gears, we're going to more up to our belly in the dirt out there. So they said, don't worry about it. So we got on the plane, and when we got there, they were right. There were twin 10,000-foot runways there and hangars and a 42,000-acre Air Force base called Groom Lake. And it wasn't on any of the maps I was working with at the time. So my rocket was down on the south end of the field at the end of the runways, and you can see the parachutes bellowing in the wind, and we landed and got out. And I was assuming we were going to go look at my rocket right then. No, we got in golf carts and rode to the center hangar, which was a very low, flat type hangar, but extremely large inside, size of about 4 football fields. So we pull in there and stop in these little golf carts, and we're just sitting there, and I'm going, well, that hangar is empty. I thought, this is interesting, you know. And then in a few minutes, little yellow and red lights came on flashing, and then out of the ground, or out of the floor, come these little rails with chains on them. They came up around all the doorways, and then the entire floor dropped out from under us. It's an elevator. We went down about 20 stories, and what was interesting about this elevator is normally you have chains that drops these things. Huge worm screws were lowering the platform down, which allows it to carry extreme weight. When we got down there, there was a lot of various aircraft and workshops and offices and such that was off of the main bay. And then off of the main bay were smaller but still rather large work bays. And in the work bays, we went down to one that had something sitting in one of the big workshops. So we went and they opened the doors, we went inside, and the room was lit up like if you ever seen a car sitting in a paint booth. You have horizontal lights running the whole length of the room, and they arc like a rainbow all the way over. The reason being, like in a paint booth, it casts no shadows. So if you're spraying a car, if you see a run and your shadow's hiding it, you'll put a run in the car. So this was the same reason. It's a good laboratory to do it that way. That means that it's casting no shadows, so whatever you're working on, you can see it without being interfering with the light. And that was the first thing that's different about the room. They pulled the big covers off this thing, and it was interesting. It's an engine that's about the size of a school bus. And this engine is a pretty much a much larger version of the thing I built. It's also an electric magnetic fusion containment engine, but it is sophisticated and it is powerful. I would have to compare mine to it. Would be like I had a Model A and this thing was a Ferrari. I mean, it's just tremendous, powerful difference, but we both were of the same engine breed. And this one had been damaged right in the center of the core. In the type of configurations we build, we have dual particle accelerators that cause the fusion reaction. Right in the center of these accelerators is an area that I call the eye of the hurricane. And it's like an infinity pattern, figure 8, and right in the center, it's quiet there on a matter of conversion area. So then this particular engine was a hole there about 4 feet in diameter. And that was the first thing I noticed. They asked me to look at it and describe to them how I thought the thing functioned. And I asked them, you know, how come I'm telling you about your engine? And they said that the engine was recovered in a project they was working with, and they wasn't sure how everything functioned on it, and personnel that were available that work on that was not available anymore. And they said if I could just help them out a little bit. Well, being 17 years old at the time, they thought I didn't pick up on too many adult innuendos, but I guess I was born old. I knew exactly what they were doing. So I said, fine, you know, yeah, I'll be glad to help my country, you know. Yeah. So we play along, and I asked them, can I walk up to it? They said, sure. As a matter of fact, you can climb on it if you want. So I got up to the engine, and then something really unusual about the engine, other than the design, the alloys itself, just the sheen and color, looked like iridescent color, like when you hold a CD disc to the sun and you see the rainbow. Imagine those kind of colors covering this entire engine and glowing like that. It's really pretty. The color of the engine was unlike any metal or alloy I was ever familiar with. And when I walked to the engine, there was a shadow on the engine. Now, I just told you that rooms were built where you couldn't have shadows. When I stuck my arm out to it, there was a shadow on the engine, but right on the table, there was no shadow. So it's not a light casting the shadow on the engine. The engine is picking up radiation off my body. So I back away from it, the shadow dissipates. When I bulk back up, it's back on. And so when I put my hands on the engine to pull myself up on it, that's where it's interesting, because the alloys in some places were so thin, it was translucent. You could see through it like a sheet of amber. So when I laid my hands on it, it's really interesting swirl pattern would come off wherever my skin was touching, and they would swirl out through the metal, going out through the alloy. And I didn't know of any metal that could do that. So I thought, wow, this thing's heat sensitive. It's picking up my body heat waves like that. So when I crawled, and they were really neat looking, smooth type wave flows coming off my hands. So I pulled myself up on the engine and started walking over it, and it was huge. It was radically different than mine because it was just so much of a different design. And the way they ran the fusion flows and the way you would run fuel in a fuel line of an engine, this thing was totally different. There was no wiring. Now, my engine was covered with miles of wiring, so I could get all the firing orders right toward the cyclotrons, the particle accelerators.
Did you immediately know that it was alien at that time?
I suspected when I put my hands on it, it felt so different. It felt like a frog belly. If you ever, I don't know if people play with frog bellies, but I did. It looked wet, but it wasn't wet. It's just so slick looking, but it wasn't slick. And it was just amazing, but it also had such a texture, and as soon as you touched it, it was cold in the air-conditioned well in the facility, but the minute you touched the metal, it became your temperature instantly. I don't know of any alloys that can do that. So I started going, oh, this may not be from around here. So I'm walking down the engine, and I go up to where the main core cells are in the particle accelerators. There's a hole blown out there, and I step down into it, just get a better look. Now, at this point of view, I'm down in the hole in the engine, and the walls are real smooth. They're so smooth, the blast, these temperatures like that engine of mine, they run at 100 million degrees centigrade. You work with plasma physics. So when the field dropped down, this engine's metals were exposed to that kind of temperature, vaporized. But as soon as it vaporized at that particular point, fail-safe, it shut the engine off. All this probably occurred in a nanosecond, a billionth of a second. So the blast only irradiated out to about 4 feet in diameter and stopped. What was interesting is the way the engine's metal was whenever there's torn places, you could rub your hands over the torn areas that are jagged, but they wouldn't cut you because they're so smooth. It's more like flesh being torn rather than metal. Well, when I come up, stood back up on top of the engine, I knew, looking at some of the interior parts of it and the way it was constructed, I had enough of what was going on. So I turned around and told them about this firing system here. And they were going, yeah, where is the firing system? And I started to tell them that because I finally figured out what this thing was doing. But then I said, well, why am I telling you about your own firing system if all this is yours and you got, this isn't from here, is it? Matter of fact, it ain't from around the area, is it, boys? And they started getting upset. I said, let's do some assumptions. This is an engine. I'm assuming it came out of a craft, a big one, by the size proportional differences, probably 300 feet plus, the length of a football field. Well, therefore, it's got occupants. What in God's name have you done with them? Well, that was the wrong thing to say, because they are up on the engine coming after me, and it's time to leave. Well, when I bend down to get off the engine, I put my hands back on the engine. Something interesting. Instead of the nice smooth wave lines, They would now look like small tornadoes coming off all my fingertips, moving through the metal. And I pulled my hands back, put them back on. There they were, but they were starting to calm down a little bit. And then I realized what this thing was. They grabbed hold of me, the Air Force guys did. We got back in the golf cart and we were riding back up to the surface. And I was sitting there thinking, I just realized what this engine is. It's a symbiotic engine. The engine is alive. It is an engine that's capable. The reason they couldn't figure out the firing order is that the tubing that was cascading all over its body looked like the same pattern you would have from a brainstem of a neurosynaptic ordering firing order. So what's happening is when the pilots sit down in their seats, their thought waves drive the engine. When I first touched the engine, I was curious and awed by it. The wavelengths were smooth off my fingers. When I was getting off down from it, I was totally angry. The engine was not picking up radiation heat waves. It was picking up mental fault energy. That engine is capable of a symbiotic relationship with the pilots.
Did you tell them that?
I didn't tell them squat. That's why they couldn't figure out the firing order. They said there was no wiring or circuitry. No, the pilots' brains are the wiring and the circuitry. The engine needs them in order to do all of its functions. In return, the pilots know exactly what the engine feels and how the spacecraft feels. The entire craft is probably symbiotic. Now, before you sit there and blow this off like it's just a bunch of science fiction, let me bring you up to date here to current events. I just left Princeton University. There's a Dr. John up there, Robert John, and he runs the Pear Research Institute. They have a contract from McDonnell Douglas, ever heard of them? Small aerospace company, to build mental shielding for firing systems on the new F-22 fighters. So people go, what's that got to do with anything? Pilot comes home at night, catches his wife in bed with another man. He's having a bad day. He's now got to go fight a fighter that is so sensitive. When he straps on his helmet, just like the Apache helicopter, you turn your head this way, the gun mounts follow your head. This firing system now links to your brain. Foxfire, Clint Eastwood. Where do you think the Hollywood's getting their ideas? McDonnell Douglas is under construction building a symbiotic relationship firing control system. Where did they get their idea? I wonder. Could have been back in June 1971, and God knows how long they've had this engine. However, it's reality. We have symbiotic engines in aeronautics. We're moving into that area right now with the F-22 and beyond, with our future fighters. So, which is science fiction, which is science fact? Where does it start and end? You can't tell anymore. When we got back up to the surface on the golf carts, there was another problem developing. I already knew that if they could hold this kind of information back, there's a lot of other things going to happen. I also knew my rocket was gone because I built it under a federal grant. They're going to take the rocket. Well, that bothered me enough, but the other problem was something they were talking about that while I was standing there being a child, they're not paying attention. And that's when I first heard the terms first strike. And I'm going, what is first strike? And then I started thinking about it. That's June 1971. We're in the throes of Vietnam War. We're in the pitched battles. Wasn't long after My Lai had occurred. We just bombed the Dickens out of Cambodia because the Soviets were supplying weapons to the north. We wanted to do surgical nuclear strikes. General Westmoreland did. And the Soviets said, you fire one of those off and we'll go to global thermal nuclear war. The only reason we didn't attack each other was MAD, M-A-D, mutual assured destruction. So the only way to win MAD is first strike. Whoever gets there first wins. My rocket engine out there went from 0 to 8,654 miles an hour in 4.1 seconds. It's the fastest thing ever. So if you take that type of engine containment system and put it on nuclear warheads and put them on your own subs, park it off Siberia, the Soviets would never see but flashes of light, and that's it. They wouldn't even have time to move out of their chairs. No retaliation. So if you take out the Soviet Union, you wouldn't destroy the whole country. You would take out all the key military sites, and the major cities, and they surrender. But if you do that, you'll have to hit another country same day, called China. They have nuclear weapons, and they're not going to stand there and watch us take out the other superpower. So about 1 billion people are going to die in a single day. So I'm sitting there going, all because of my engine? Unbelievable. So I scooped up a hand of full of graphite grease off of the hangar door there at the wheels and started crying. And I said, I want to see my rocket. So they thought, just a kid, take him out to see his rocket. I want to see what it at least looked like. So when I went out there with the 2 sergeants on the golf cart, we got out there. I walked over to it and opened the hatch, opened the particle accelerators, put the graphite grease, just smeared it on the doors inside and closed it. When you turn on particle accelerators and the fuel is using deuterium, ask any physicist what happens with deuterium meets graphite. It's pretty bad. It's a major reaction explosion. So I turned on the particle accelerators with no fuel involved, and I told the 2 sergeants, it's got a fuel leak, we got to run for it. So we get on a golf cart and take off. I gave us 60 seconds on a time delay. When you engaged, it exploded. It blew a whole size of a football field out there. There's nothing left. Now they have no rocket. Now they have nothing to work with, but they got this kid. So I was told I'm going nowhere for the rest of my life, and it was scary. They threw me in a room and kept me there for about 10 hours. And then a lot of noise in the outside. The door opens up, and there's this big stogie chomping figure in the doorway going like that, and his name is Curtis LeMay. So he came there and got me and took me all the way back home to Wright-Patterson. He took me back home to my parents. He told me that they're not going to be through with you. They'll deal with you again. And he was right. So that was the end of my summer vacation in my junior year in high school, how I spent my summer vacation. And
What did he say to your parents?
well, my parent, LeMay just he didn't say anything to my parents. He said he left it up to me. He just got me home. So it was quiet through the winter and the spring, and I'm graduating from high school. It's June 10th, 1972, and I'm ready to go to Ohio State. All of a sudden, I'm shaking hands in line, and I get hold of this one line, and I turn around, I got hold of this guy's hand, and it is a DOD agent from Groom Lake, right there in Centerburg, Ohio. And he slaps this paper in my hand. I read it. It says, "Greetings, I'm drafted." And they throw me in a car. My parents are hollering, and nothing they can do because I'm now property of the United States government. It's called conscription, buddy, and you're gone. So after about 3 hours, I'm back. I was on a plane. Ended up at Langley, Virginia, home of the CIA and more fun activities. What they wanted was the engine to be rebuilt again. And we had to work out some compromises. I ended up spending 10 years in the Navy. I never did build the engine again. That was the last thing Curtis LeMay told me to do. He said, never build another rocket as long as you live. You might make it out of here. And he was right. So instead, I agreed to build jet engines. So I was a jet engine designer and technician in the Navy, and worked on the Tomcat and the E-2C Hawkeyes and other various aircrafts. And so it became an interesting career. After 10 years, I had enough of that, opened up a private consulting business, and I've been doing space technology transfer, where we transfer technology from space program into commercial applications. I've been doing that for the last 17 years. So I can take you around the Earth 8 times as fast as you blink your eyes. That's the capability of this type of propulsion.
How is this type of propulsion? How did you come about this type of propulsion?
Oh, God. Yeah, well, this is not the place to bring that up, I guess. Dreams. It all came in dreams. All the mathematics, everything. I was working quantum physics when I was 7. I was born with it. Yeah. So now you know how all this stuff works. When I got to a certain point, though, the mathematics were too difficult to achieve, mainly because there was no computers available. I mean, handheld calculators didn't come out 10 years later. You know, the only thing I've got, I have no fax, no modems, no email, no laptops, floppy disks, hard drives, none of this stuff existed. You had a pencil, a piece of paper, and a slide ruler. and chalkboards all over the buildings, and your brain. And born with photographic memory, I was able to contain great amounts of what we call algorithms. I met somebody else later that could help me with that when I was building this big rocket. I ran to the end of my mathematical capability, and my high school science teacher came out to my lab where I'd work all the time. He looked at these writings. He borrowed some of them, made photocopies, and gave mine back. Took the photocopies, went to Ohio State University. Everybody in the physics department's looking at this going, where did you get Stephen Hawking's work in his handwriting? Or, it looks personal handwriting. No, it came from this 15-year-old kid building these rockets out in these cow fields. So they mailed the stuff to Cambridge, England. And, let's see, that was June 71. In July 1970, I went to Ohio State University with my science teacher. July 1969. And this little frail guy was sitting in one of the big academic classrooms. And I walked in, I saw these equations on the walls, and I went, who's messing with my work? And the little guy stands up, indeed. I went, he says, it's his work. And I went, yeah, oh, I guess it is. Besides, it's not going to work down on that side anyhow, pointing to that part of the room on the chalkboard. And he goes, how so? I said, well, walk over and, start erasing it. Wait, it works like this. So he looks at it, and then he goes, how do you validate that? I go, rocket engine. And he's looking at the equation, his back is to me, and he goes, how do you get all your information? I went, comes in dreams every night consecutively. So he drops his chalk, and he turns around. I figure, end of conversation, good. I'm busy, I need to go home anyhow. I start to head for a door, and he goes, wait a minute. He goes, we dream on the same wavelength. All my stuff comes to me in dreams. Therefore, we are brothers, have a seat. And his name was Stephen Hawking. So we worked out some math that allowed me to achieve see, we're working on parallel mass. There's only one thing that can swallow and control a fusion containment explosion. That's a black hole. It swallows the sun. What is the sun? Billions of H-bombs going off. So anyway, that was how I got help with on mathematics of that. But the way the engine works, it's on the same principle of a balloon. You blow up a balloon, release it, and it goes around the room. The air escapes out the nozzle, pushes the balloon forward. Well, the same principle with this engine. When you open up the one end of the field with a plasma beam to open up the particle chambers, you're going to get all this matter flowing out. The matter is moving light. So Newtonian law takes over in space. For every action, there's an opposite and equal reaction, just like the balloon. When this engine turns itself on, eventually the vehicle is going to catch up with the speed of the exiting matter out the tailpipe. How fast is it going? 186,000 miles a second, speed of light. This engine's capable of light speed. And we had it in 1971. So.
But you knew that it was going to be put to potential catastrophic results.
Not potential, for sure. They were planning to do first strike. And they had planned on doing first strike for about the last 15 years. So the Soviet Union collapsed. They were always trying to beat the mad equation, mutual assured destruction. The only way to do it is to be there first. Everybody had the same speeds. So whoever got faster wins. And
what I'm asking is,
why
are you starting to go public with this information?
There's a shift, a change in perception of the public and the attitude. If it hadn't been for that, I would have went to my grave and never said a word about this because I wanted a normal, mainstream life career. Like I'm going to tell people, I'll stand on top of an alien engine in the basement of a top secret base called Area 51, mainly because I built an engine similar to it and it landed there, and that's why they wanted me there. And I was 17 years old at the time. Never despite the fact that I won the most outstanding field of engineering sciences from the United States Air Force in 1971, and we can see newspaper stories and clippings of me in that rocket. So I still wouldn't stand a chance. So I decided, no, I'm not saying a word. I saw a lot of people take tremendous criticism in the 60s and the 70s, but then there's been a shift in the last 20 years. The American public now really believes there's somebody else out there. And if somebody would land here right now, the American public would go, cool. As long as they're not trying to blow us away or eat us up or something, there's no problem. What they will be a problem is that if the federal government's caught lying, which I know they are lying, they've been lying for probably since 1971 that I know for sure. So if they've been lying, then Roswell is very likely it's true. So they've been lying 50 consecutive years and probably much longer than that. The engine I saw did not come from the Roswell crash. The engine I saw was as big as the Roswell craft. So this is something even bigger. So another one. So how many do they have? How much they got? You know, that's where the real problem is. Who shot King? Who shot, you know, Senator Kennedy, you know, and JFK? If they're lied this much to us, that's where the danger is that if it comes out, it's not so much as the public's going to panic that there's alien life out there. No, it's going to be anarchy because people are going to be so ticked off with DC for lying so many years. That is what the government fears. They do not fear you being violent hostile about aliens landing and we're going to go crazy. No, they're going to freak out because they're going to be caught in about a 5-decade lie. And that's why they put out the most ridiculous story. Yeah, we take these dummies and drop them from weather balloons. Honest to God, come on, y'all. Just the average guy working in a plant, making a living, trying to pay his bills, raise his family. He's going to look at that and go, yeah, right. You know, and the polls are showing that. So that's why I said it's pretty safe now to say something. Not only that, people made Independence Day, the movie, and they were talking about Area 51, and I was looking at it closely, and somebody in Area 51 talked to the people who made the movie because they were at the dimensions, the way the walls were shaped, there was some stuff they missed, but it was correct. So I figure if they can let that out, and they're still here, and then the attitude shifting, it's just one thing after another. The public's attitude, perception. I can come out forward now and take the heat from critics, but I couldn't take the heat from the general public because you just got to live with them. Critics are always going to be there. They'll be there like gravity. You can depend on it. But that's not the problem.
Do you think the aliens are making themselves more apparent?
Well, when I testified to a joint session of the Senate and Congress in April for CSETI for Dr. Greer, we got right on to that. And my question was, is somebody coming to dinner? And it's not Sidney Poitier, is it? You know, it's possible if they have cut a deal with somebody, another race or whatever, they could have reneged on the deal, and they may be en route to meet us, the citizens of the planet, in person. So the government's in a real pitch panic because what are you going to do? No, you can't come here. How are you going to stop them? And on top of that, they're going to be caught in major lies. So they looked real panicked about this situation. You know, I've been sitting on this thing for 27 years, and I didn't bother saying anything. And Dr. Greer with CSETI was able to get a hearing set up, and he hammered me for 2 months to finally, the week before the testimony, I finally said, I'll go. So the fact that he could get that established where he was at, Independence Day, shift in the general public's attitude, by the time you add all this stuff up, it comes out to equal time to talk. The briefing was set up by Dr. Greer with CSETI, which I think is the Center for Research for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, and he's in Asheville, North Carolina. And he's a MD, an ER doctor. And Dr. Greer is a very intelligent man. So he had set up a meeting for Congress he had set up within the political structure and framework to run the UFO question right through the normal channels, which all 3 years I've been watching stuff, and he's the only one that got that far, and I was pretty impressed with it. So I finally decided to jump in there. He had 12 other witnesses besides myself, and we all testified to him at that time. And there was about 300 people there. There was a lot of staff there, but there was a lot of senators and congressmen. I recognized some of them. Some of them I'd known before anyhow. And we got in some serious discussions at the time. The next day, we were supposed to talk to the press. The other 12 were allowed to talk to the press. I was not allowed to talk to the press.
Not allowed by who?
Steve Greer asked me not to talk to the press. And I think he was absolutely right at the time. Because he thought, hang on, guy. He does. It's because I'm so sweet. It's the makeup. Right. So I think Dr. Greer was right for holding off, keeping me back a little bit. The reason being is that I was too much for the press to get into right then, because he's got more hearings, more strategy he's got to work. So we talked about that later, and we had a little bit of misunderstanding in the first there, but we got it straightened out. But I agree with the way he's doing it, because there's more testimony and more things I can produce later. And so he's aware of that, and we'll wait for it. So that's pretty much after I did the testimony, I flew home after that. When I agreed to testify in Washington, D.C., Dr. Greer told me that he has about 120 witnesses that are hardware contacts. That's really important, because there are other contacts that people just see radar images and lights and lock on and such. Well, when we got there, the 12 witnesses he had, they all saw radar images and confirmed some lock on, and they chased them on ground radar, onboard radar and plane, which to me in the mainstream world, that's pretty darn exciting right there. But I realized I was the only one that had hardware contact, and I need somebody else, because if not, I am alone in a category by myself, and I really wasn't ready for that. So I was waiting at the last minute. If I had to, I may have not testified. But there was a lawyer in front of me. His name was Steve Lufkin, and Steve's story was that he was 18 years old in 1960 in the basement of the Pentagon. He was an encryption soldier, officer in the Navy, or in the Army, and their job was to break codes. And his senior staff guy walked in, and Jay laid down 3 pieces of metal, and one of them was about a foot long, had writings and hieroglyphics on it. And they tried to decipher it, and they couldn't, because they didn't have a Rosetta Stone or anything to work with. So while he was saying that, I was going, oh, great. So I start writing all this stuff down. And I hand Steve the paper, and Steve looked at the paper and goes, and like any good lawyer under testimony, he goes, I swear I've never met this man before. And I thought, great. So when I got up, what rattled everything was he had about 12 different emblems. He remembered them. I hit all 12 emblems. So the way I told the Senator in Congress, I went, how could I do that? Simple. I was standing on top of the engine that piece of metal came from. As a matter of fact, there's about 98 different emblems on this engine. I was pouring a photographic memory, and I got them all. So if you'd like to see them, here they are. And they are interesting the way they were grouped in clusters, and they were on every single device that was a separate device. And I realized what they were actually. Not some great cosmic messages or anything. They're serial numbers for parts. That's how they figured out where their parts are. They got, just like us, we got to know where all these. After looking at the emblems, some of the emblems repeated themselves. There was one that had a very similar mathematical symbol of pi, but it was a modified symbol of it. And it would show up every time there was a curved radius. And I'm going, there were some of the emblems would be reversed on the other side of the engine when the 2 parts were the same, left and right. And I'm going, that's all it is. No big, great cosmic message. It's serial numbers, just like we do on jet engines in the Navy. We group out our numbers. And but it would give you the alphabet of their language. So I was able to retain that. But also, I memorized how the engine was built. So let's build another one.
Many of you may have reviewed this story as a grand hoax, but Mr. Adair's achievements as an autodidact aren't only genuine, but his presentations have inspired many organizations, and his list of clients include the American Society of Mechanical Engineers, Carolina Power and Light Company, Clemson University, Consolidated Freightways, Edison Electric, Georgia Power Company, Haynes Corporation, Hoechst Celanese Corporation, Kentucky Fried Chicken, Reynolds Aluminum, R.J. Reynolds, Thomasville Furniture Industries, Union Electric Company, and the United States Army, Air Force, and Navy, just to name but a few. Today, David Adair is the president of Intersect, Inc., and continues to lecture and provide consulting services to companies and organizations that want to know how to use the latest cutting edge of technological advances in their lives and their business.